The protagonist, Junwoo Sung, receives a call from his sister, Jaina. She complains that he's still sleeping even though it's already 2:13 p.m. and today is their meeting with the teacher. Consequently, Junwoo hurries out of bed and shows up at Jaina's school, and she can hardly believe that this is really her brother. In response, he asks if he looks odd. She replies that she wouldn't use that word, while Junwoo explains that he couldn't meet with the teacher wearing sweatpants. It's not just Jaina who notices a change in him. All the girls around can't take their eyes off him as he attracts admiring glances wherever he goes. Seeing her brother winning hearts at school, Jaina asks if he wants her to introduce him to someone, but Junwoo pinches her cheek and tells her to chill out. At the meeting with the teacher, she shares that Jaina is an excellent student with great grades. She sets an example for other students, and the teacher enjoys teaching her. Jaina has performed well in mock exams and has enough grades to enter any medical school. However, the teacher asks Junwoo not to pressure his sister more than necessary. Besides that, the teacher has another matter to discuss. She wants to know if Junwoo, as the older brother, would allow his sister to become a hunter if she were to awaken. Junwoo answers about ceremony that he would not, and the teacher had expected that response. He asks why, and she admits that it's a lot to ask, but there's something she'd like him to do. Then he unexpectedly visits Han Song-yi and shows her a photo of Jaina, asking if she knows this girl. Startled to discover that Junwoo is Jaina's brother, Song makes it clear that, although she doesn't know what the teacher said, she won't stop hunting to return to school. Junwoo reminds her that she's rank E and won't be able to make a living from it. Although she made some money in his team, it was an exceptional case. Song doesn't want a lecture and retorts, reminding him that he is also rank E. However, he explains that he didn't come to ask her to stop hunting, but to invite her somewhere else. Next, we go to Woo Jinchul, who is waiting at the airport for the arrival of Hwang Dong-soo, brother of Dong-suk. Jinchul welcomes the hunter back, but Dong-soo makes it clear that this dump isn't his home. Nonetheless, he's surprised that a manager from the Hunters Association came to greet him personally. The manager asks how long he'll stay, and he answers that he needn't worry as he doesn't like this country enough to stay long. Jinchul wants to know if the guy came all the way here just to meet those two, but Dong-soo doesn't want the manager questioning things he already knows the answer to. Besides, it's fine if the surveillance team pretends not to know what he intends to do with those two inside a dungeon. First with rank E, then with rank D. As he radiates his strength around his body, Dong-soo asks if Jinchul is dumb enough to try to stop him. Meanwhile, Choi Jong-in informs the president of the association, Go Gunny, that some monsters can now fly, albeit short distances for now. Either way, the future capabilities of these monsters are unknown. Go announces that he will arrange an investigation into the matter. When night falls, Junwoo goes to a portal and introduces himself to manager An and Hyun. Delighted by the young man's arrival, they hadn't expected Junwoo to get in touch again. Song-yi appears alongside him, and he apologizes for the inconvenience, but An makes it clear that a request from Hunter Sung is in order, while Hyun asks if the training is for this girl. Junwoo replies affirmatively, then An explains that they've come in a good time as this area has been designated as a high-frequency portal zone, and a rank C portal opened this morning. At that moment, a man approaches and asks if the guys will take long, reminding them that they aren't here for a stroll. Junwoo asks who he is, and An introduces him as Kim Chul, a rank A tank, and that he is included in this training excursion for younger hunters as the leader of the attack team. Annoyed, Kim Chul grumbles to himself that he will have to take care of a bunch of rank E hunters, while An mentions that the attack team will consist of 1 rank A, 5 rank B, and 2 rank C. With Junwoo and Han Song-yi's arrival, there are 10 hunters in total. Junwoo hopes the girl will back out upon seeing how brutal the raids can be, but they've made an excellent lineup for the group. If they succeed too easily, it will compromise his objective. Kun approaches and asks the protagonist to limit his participation to give space for the rookies to show their skills, and he assures that he will do so. Thus, the expedition begins and the participants enter the portal. However, as soon as he steps into the dungeon, Junwoo is struck by a strange feeling. Suddenly, the portal reacts unexpectedly, so he grabs Song-yi and tries to pull her out. As he struggles with only his head outside, he asks manager An to bring the main attack team as quickly as possible. Having said that, he is pulled back in. Without delay, Baek Yoon-ho receives a call and can't believe that a rank C portal has turned red. Nonetheless, he is heading there right now. Inside the portal, Junwoo opens his eyes and finds himself in the middle of a forest surrounded by snow. Everyone wonders where they have ended up, while Kim Chul explains that this is a red portal. Song-yi asks Junwoo what this means, and he explains that unlike common portals, when you pass through a red portal, you are taken to a dungeon isolated from the outside world. Until the boss is defeated or a dungeon break occurs, there's no way out and no one from outside can help. Moreover, the monsters are stronger in such situations. With that said, an ice arrow hits directly in the face of a hunter, who falls to the ground lifeless. Another arrow is shot towards Songyi, but Jinwoo manages to catch it in the air and saves her life. Around them, ice elves were positioned in the trees. Jinwoo notes that the elves targeted the two weakest members of the group. When the elves leave, Song asks what those creatures were, and his friend explains that they are ice elves. However, due to their malevolent nature, the hunters refer to them by a name more fitting for demons, Ice Slayers. At that moment, Kim Chul captures everyone's attention and warns that they will face enemies ranked B or higher, and without any support. For this reason, the survival of each hunter present depends on following the highest-ranked comrade's orders. Having said that, Kim admits that even he cannot defeat these monsters alone, so he decides to form a second group to increase their chances of survival. However, instead of forming balanced teams, the A-rank hunter forms a clique, selecting the best members for himself and leaving those ranked C and below in the other team. According to him, for every day they spend inside the red portal, only an hour passes outside. Meaning, whether they are there to kill the boss or for a dungeon break, the survivors can only leave after many months, too long to be burdened with dead weight. Yet despite the fearful expressions of the weaker hunters, Kim Chul doesn't want them to feel this way. After all, if they just survive until the boss is defeated, everyone will safely return home. At the end of his speech, a girl volunteers to join the weaker group and the leader grants permission, though he thinks her foolish for pitying them. Approaching Jinwoo, the woman points out that Kim hadn't even noticed the arrows arriving, unlike Jinwoo, who certainly isn't rank E as he claims. Finally, Kim Chul announces that he will follow the cleared path, so Jinwoo-sum decides to take the route into the forest. Along the way, Kim shows his teammates the claw marks of an ice bear on a tree, admitting they are practically sacrificing the E-rank group. A member highlights that they probably haven't even had training, and that it's terrible luck to come on a raid just to be killed. Hearing this, Kim remembers that the other team has a C-rank and Park Heejin, who is B-rank. Nonetheless, he just assumed that the E-rank guy was the leader. Amidst this, everyone hears the sound of a bear and prepares for battle. Soon after, the gigantic creature appears, leaving everyone stunned by its size, except for Kim Chul, who orders everyone to focus on surviving. In response, the bear attacks the team leader, who raises his shield and causes the animal's claws to break in half. With his axe, Kim does the same, but this time with the entire body of the wild ice beast. However, two more bears nearby attack the group. Meanwhile, in the other team, Heejin asks her colleagues to stop because the tree markings indicate this territory belongs to the ice bears, and they should return before the animals appear. However, Jinwoo explains that this is precisely why he chose this path. If the territory belongs to the bears, they only need to worry about these animals, which is better than facing intelligent enemies like the elves. Changing the subject, the team leader takes a coat out of his inventory for each member and stares into the forest. Anxious, Songyi asks what he's seeing, to which he promises to keep her safe, as he was the one who brought her along, but asks the girl not to ask questions. He extends this request to the other two team members, asking them not to question or request anything from him. At that moment, an ice bear encounters the humans. For this reason, Jinwoo changes his title to Wolf Slayer. Meanwhile, outside the portal, Baek concludes that there's no way to open this thing and everything depends on Hunter Kim. On reports that Jinwoo-sung is accompanying the attack team, but when Bark asks about the level of this hunter, the manager lowers his head and reveals that he is rank E, but there is suspicion that this guy has gone through his second awakening. In the meantime, Dong-soo arrives and notes that if the big shots of the White Tiger Guild are there must be an A-rank portal at stake. Now, what he doesn't understand is why a rank E trash entered this portal, which belongs to the White Tiger. Regrettably, it seems that Jinwoo got involved in this mess just when Dong-soo was after him. At least, according to Dong-soo himself, Jinwoo is likely to become monster fodder inside. Speaking of which, the protagonist has just eliminated the last bear among the several that attacked his group. With this, he levels up and celebrates the fact that this red portal gives much more XP than usual. Startled, Heejin asks who this guy is. At night, they eat the meat of the bears they killed. Amidst a conversation by the campfire, Songye finds it bizarre that Jinwoo goes to exercise even after fighting that way. Far away, Jinwoo goes to the bear's den and summons Commander Knight Igris, the Blood Red, along with his subordinate warriors. The bears leave the den to defend their home and engage in a bloody battle against the specters. Observing this army in action for the first time, Jinwoo notes that the artillery has high firepower and the infantry regenerates quickly, but consumes a lot of mana. At this point, the leader of the bears shows up and eliminates all the shadow soldiers that were summoned, reducing Jinwoo's mana points to 0. Consequently, he orders Igris to advance. As the Blood Red takes a few steps forward, the bear charges at the knight with all its weight. However, Agris dodges the blow and even tears off part of the enemy's shoulder, leaving it even more furious. Nevertheless, the Dark Spectre is extremely fast and strikes the bear several times, bringing it to its knees and all bloodied. Still, the beast tries to use one last move, forcing the knight to cut its head off and end the fight. Meanwhile, in the other team, an arrow hits another companion of Kim Chul. Even facing the Ice Elves and at a great disadvantage, he declares that he will join the elite of the White Tiger Guild. However, when he sees an elf up close ending the life of a companion, the man runs desperately into the forest. Returning to Jinwoo Sung, he commands the dead bears to awaken. Then shadows emerge from the corpses of the animals, ready to serve the man with all their ferocity. Outside the red portal, the onlookers discuss that 3 hours have passed, equivalent to 3 days on the inside. Bak summarily recalls that the environment inside a red portal is merciless. Then Dong-soo imagines that Jinwoo must be dead and walks toward his car to leave. However, halfway there, he remembers that this boy is not from the White Tiger Guild, and thus wants to know why he was on the attack team. Concerned about the situation, On explains that Jinwoo Sung is an acquaintance of his and wanted to observe a C-rank raid, so he ended up joining in. With that said, Dong-soo grabs the association manager by the throat and demands to know what treasure he's uncovered this time, since he always had a knack for sniffing out interesting news. However, Baek grabs Dong-soo's arm and tells him to release his colleague. After letting go of On, Dong-soo remarks that Baek only thinks he's a big fish because this country is a little pond. Upon hearing this, Baek awakens his power and triggers a vast and powerful wave of energy. On moves away as best he can, fearing that if no one intervenes, an S-rank fight will break out right there. Sure enough, Dong-soo reacts and the two clash, causing an explosion at the site. In the meantime, Kim Chul walks through the forest after escaping the elves, freezing cold and imagining that his group could have won if they had the proper equipment. Further ahead, he reaches the bear den and discovers that they are all dead, unable to believe that the E-rank team could have done this. Therefore, he deduces that it was the Ice Elves and starts running again. Back at the S-rank duel, Jinchul intervenes just in time and prevents the two rivals from colliding directly. Afterwards, he confesses that he does not understand Dong-soo's interest in Jinwoo, but he personally assessed the young man 2 months ago, and Hunter Sung remains E-rank without a doubt. Regarding Hwang Dong-suk, Dong-soo's brother, he was killed in combat against a magical monster, according to the surveillance team's conclusion. Dong-soo laughs and replies that this is the story the association tells the public, while the real culprit behind his brother's death is that playboy from Yujin Construction. If Dong-soo believes so, Jinchul asks why he's after Jinwoo Sung, and the businessman replies that it's just an excuse to kill the kid. However, Dong-soo receives a message on his cell phone and comments that Jinwoo is lucky today. Inside the red portal, Kim Chul encounters the E-rank group and is enraged by the fact that they are still alive and even have cold weather gear like coats, tents, and even food. Overcome with anger, he approaches the group and yells that his entire team was eliminated because they lacked equipment and supplies. In other words, these weaklings were hiding these crucial resources and led his companions to their deaths. First, Kim focuses his gaze on Heejin, who is the highest-ranking member of the team, and says he will count to 3 and wants to hear a confession. With that, he starts counting and draws his sword. At that moment, Jinwoo Sung appears and sends the A-rank tank flying away, mocking the fact that he is blaming others for the death of his companions. Then the E-rank hunter orders the Ice Elves to stop using stealth because their aura is too strong to go unnoticed. Consequently, the Ice Killers abandon their invisibility. Their leader is surprised that some human worms have fared well in this hostile forest. When Jinwoo responds, he realizes he can understand the language of the elves, but does not know why. Anyway, the leader was informed by a subordinate that one of the humans is strong, and this subordinate wishes to fight him. With that, Jinwoo swiftly incapacitates the challenging elf with a precise strike of his dagger, but when he attacks the leader, he is able to block in time, though the horse was not so lucky. The elf leader asks why Jinwoo is pretending to be a human. The man doesn't understand, so the creature explains that his race hears a voice that orders them to kill humans, but no one had heard about Jinwoo Sung. Regarding this, Jinwoo imagines that this case is similar to the system's instructions. Perhaps the voice does not direct the elves to him because he is the player. Finally, the enemy announces that he has no reason to fight and wishes to resolve the situation sensibly. If Jinwoo hands over the humans behind him, he will be left in peace. Without responding directly, Jinwoo asks why the elves hunt humans, but as soon as the opponent starts to answer, a strange effect occurs as if time had turned back, and the elf leader makes the same proposal again about Jinwoo handing over his friends in exchange for his life. In the end, the man makes it clear that he does not accept the proposal. The elf remembers that they are outnumbered, but Jinwoo Sung highly doubts that. At that moment, the bears and shadow soldiers are summoned and placed in front of the elves, who do not flinch and advance against the foes. Soon, an intense fight begins while the three members of Jinwoo's group flee desperately. Seeing this, some elves aim their arrows at the fugitives, but Jinwoo slaughters all in time. Having done so, he understands why the leader of the elves is confident. After all, although the summons are immortal, Jinwoo needs to spend magical power to regenerate them, meaning that at some point this mana will run out. Besides that, the chief of the Ice Killers is visibly stronger than him. Speaking of this elf, he charges against Jinwoo Sung, who blocks the blow and reflects that even with Igris, this battle will not be easy. The elf introduces himself as Baruka and asks the name of his rival, who responds and summons his daggers. Without delay, the two clash again, and Baruka is so surprised by the opponent's skill that he admits it has been a long time since he had such an interesting fight. Suddenly, a giant fireball falls from the sky and hits the leader of the Ice Elves directly. It was the spectral mages subordinates of Igris, the Blood Red. Meanwhile, Kim Chul finally wakes up, remembering he was struck by Jinwoo, so he grabs his sword from the snow to rejoin the fight. Unaware of this, Jinwoo reflects on how the magical soldiers bought him some time. Regardless, Baruka emerges unscathed from a fireball and charges at Jinwoo, who just notices Kim arriving behind him. As Baruka closes in, his opponent has a vision of the future. In it, he summons a huge creature with an axe and shield to handle the elf. Back in the present, Igris is pitted against Kim Chul and mercilessly pierces his stomach with a fatal blow. With the man's death, Jinwoo commands him to rise and transforms the tank into his shadow ally. Meanwhile, as Baruka approaches the enemies, he is repelled by the shadow giant Jinwoo had envisioned. In fact, it was the spectral form of Kim Chul all along, whom Jinwoo names Iron. Despite the dark soldier's frightening appearance, Baruka shows no fear and vows to tear the specter to pieces first. Thus, Iron and Baruka begin their battle, and noticing that the Axe Warrior is slow, the elf plans to exploit this weakness. In the midst of this, Jinwoo's teammates are hidden in the forest. Songyi asks if hunter battles are always like this, and Heejin replies that if it were her, she wouldn't even be a hunter. Honestly, she has never seen anything like this. Bored with the opponent's slowness, Baruka challenges everyone at once, including Iron, Igris, and Jinwoo Sung himself. Not to be rude, the trio charges at the adversary, who manages to handle them without any damage. Motivated to kill Iron first, the Ice Elf strikes his shield hard and dodges a blow from Sigrid at the last moment. However, this move was the setup for Jinwoo to pierce Baruka's shoulder with his dagger. Despite the damage inflicted, Jinwoo is impressed by how the rival escaped the fatal blow amidst everything. After narrowly escaping death with cunning, Baruka declares that Jinwoo is underestimating him. In turn, the man admits that the enemy is strong, but he can't say the same for his soldiers. With that, Baruka surveys the battlefield and sees that his subordinates have all been killed. Regardless, he doubts Jinwoo's pawns are worth anything without him and resumes attacking the human. Jinwoo reacts by throwing his dagger at the elf, who dodges and thinks the man irresponsible for doing so. However, the player makes the dagger return towards the target at full speed, forcing Baruka to block the weapon in the nick of time. Moreover, this move costs him his blade, which breaks on impact. Then, Jinwoo orders Iron to attack, and the giant grasps the elf tightly. With that, the spectral mages cast fire at the target and cause a massive explosion. Yet despite the coordinated and successful attack, Baruka emerges from the ashes and vows to kill everyone. But he did not count on Jinwoo's sudden appearance, who stabs his dagger into the elf's rib and declares the end of the fight. Still, Baruka refuses to yield and stands up, until Iron uses a giant hammer to crush the enemy and splatter his blood everywhere. With the victory, Jinwoo levels up and notices that Iron is still pummeling Baruka's corpse out of pure rage. Then he teaches the Spectre to control his impulses. Having done that, he returns to his teammates and announces that now they can leave. At that moment, the portal reopens and the group celebrates their survival and the chance to return home. Nevertheless, before returning, Jinwoo has something to do with Baruka. Outside the portal, Manager An believes that it has been a week inside and Bak can go home if he wants, as he will be waiting. However, the S rank decides to stay as long as there are guild members in danger, even if it means staying until dawn. With that, the portal returns to its natural color and out come the first hunters, Go and Park Heejin. Next, Jinwoo Sung and Han Songyi appear, and then the portal closes. Baek asks where Kim Chul is, and the survivors lower their heads, responding without words. As Jinwoo was leaving with Songyi, Baek wishes to ask some questions. Removing the man's hand from his shoulder, the young man advises that he's tired and suggests the S rank seek answers from someone in his guild. Annoyed by the man's behavior, Baek grabs his shoulder again, this time with his body partially transformed. He emphasizes that 6 members of his guild have disappeared, and it is up to him to find out why. In turn, with eyes radiating mana, Jinwoo responds that might be so, but it was he who saved the survivors, so some gratitude would be nice. Hearing this, the White Tiger Guild Master apologizes and admits the boy is right. After Jinwoo's departure, Baek asks Heejin what got into that guy as he doesn't seem very sociable. Heejin responds that he became moody after defeating the dungeon boss. An argues that Jinwoo must just be tired because he isn't a bad person. Finally, Baek asks An to recruit Hunter Sung to the White Tiger Guild at any cost. Sometime later, Jinwoo drops Song-yi off at her door. She thanks him for today and counts on her colleague when they do this again. After starting the car, Jinwoo notes that not even a full day has passed on Earth, while he displays Baruka's dagger, the only interesting item he got from the red portal. Definitely, the level of that ice elf was too high, so much so that Jinwoo couldn't capture his shadow even after 3 attempts, the most he could. Thus, already at home and looking at his face in the mirror, the protagonist ponders that it was a lot of effort for little return, although this was the 3rd time. At this, his sister shouts from outside and threatens to eat without him. The next day, Jinwoo meets Yoo Jinhoo, who was wearing ridiculously shiny armor, for them to go somewhere, and they must pick someone up along the way. Thus, they go to Song-yi, who gets very close to Jinwoo in the car and apologizes for making him pick her up. Seeing things heating up, Jinhoo warns the handsome man that Miss Han is underage. Jinwoo asks what that has to do with anything. Then Jinhoo changes the subject and starts the car. After their journey, the group arrives in a dungeon and is immediately caught in the midst of a conflict. Jinhoo, instead of joining in, is captivated by the ghostly figures fighting against the ogres. He asks Jinwoo what these creatures are, and the protagonist realizes he had mentioned them to his partner before. Without going into details, he simply replies that it's one of his abilities. Unsatisfied, Yu wants to know if he can conjure ghostly soldiers, but Jinwoo feels it's too complex to explain right now and changes the subject. After the victory, he snaps his fingers and orders his army to collect the precious stones, and now Jinhoo kneels down and asks to at least help with the gems. Instantly, a shadow soldier hands a bunch of gems to the hunter, who thanks him for the understanding and brings a smile to his friend's face. Meanwhile, on a shipwrecked boat, a warrior screams in despair while a man tells him not to yell and to stay calm, explaining that the others who are down have only fainted. However, as he doesn't speak English, he assumes the warrior has no idea what he's saying, so he points to himself and says a few things that go misunderstood. Returning to the duo of hunters, they head to a restaurant after the expedition to enjoy some meat and a drink, celebrating the completion of Jinwoo's 19th mission under contract with Yoo Jinhoo. According to the hare, it would have been impossible without his comrade. Jinwoo asks what the next step for his friend is, and he explains that he's going to take a written test at an association to obtain a guild master's license and use this license to negotiate with his father. Meanwhile, Jinwoo mentions he will be out of touch for a while, as he needs to go to a certain place. After this, Jinhoo turns his glass and preempts that he should be told to keep quiet if he's being annoying. He then reveals he has a brother 10 years his senior who doesn't like him. The two have never spent time together like true brothers. On the other hand, Jinwoo saved Jinhoo's life and accepted his request. In other words, the hare lowers his head and confesses he wishes his friend were his brother. When this is said, an awkward silence envelops the room, and Jinhoo keeps his head down until Jinwoo serves his comrade and replies that, in that case, they are brothers from now on. Hearing these words, Jinhoo holds back tears, turns another glass of drink, and almost imposingly offers more meat to his new brother. Jinwoo asks if he's drunk, but he insists he's sober. In the meantime, the man who assaulted others on the shipwrecked boat is found imprisoned and handcuffed. According to the authorities responsible for the arrest, this man identifies as a foreign hunter who was trapped in a portal 10 years ago and never managed to escape until he ended up in the United States. Since he does not speak English, the suspect's interrogation must be conducted with a translator present. At the moment, there isn't belief that this prisoner is a humanoid beast, so the authorities have requested assistance from an S-rank hunter from Washington, who is a compatriot of his. This hunter's name is Hwang Dong-soo, and the investigation will continue as soon as he returns to the United States. By the way, one of the officers asks the prisoner's name, and another, struggling to pronounce it, says his name is Sung Il-won. After returning home, ready to leave again, Sung Il-won tells his sister he will be away for a month with a friend, and she asks since when did he have a girlfriend and why he hasn't told even his little sister. In the next scene, the boy returns to a place he had been some time ago. Around level 20, he faced Cerberus in the Demon Castle and couldn't finish the job, but now he has tripled in level and feels he has a chance. So he opens the dungeon door with the appropriate key and storms in. As soon as he enters, he is tasked with collecting 10,000 demonic souls, which makes the young man sweat due to the absurd amount. But since he returned to the castle in search of the elixir of life, be it 10 or 100,000, Jinwoo will take down each one. Meanwhile, as he submits his resume to his father, Jinwoo asks that the guild be passed on to him. The old man recalls that Jinsung, his elder son, had another idea for this guild, but Jinwoo argues that this plan of putting someone from outside as master is too risky for the company. That said, his father mentions that it was Jinwoo Sung involved in the dungeon tragedy, where Hwang Dong-suk's group was eliminated, and in the death of the prisoners from the supervision department. Still, this man remains free and unpunished for his actions. And it was this man who participated in literally all of Jinwoo's expeditions to the portals. At the recent incident of the Red Portal from the White Tiger Guild a few days ago, it was said that Sung Il-won Sung was responsible for safely evacuating the survivors. So Jinwoo's father imagines that his son managed to get the guild master license largely thanks to Jinwoo's help. Hence, he questions if the son feels he could lead a guild knowing this. Still, even after hearing everything his father said, the boy insists that he would like to have the Yujin Guild. Therefore, the powerful businessman gives his son a chance, but with a condition. According to what he has heard, the White Tiger is wanting to recruit Jinwoo Sung after the Red Portal incident, and Jinwoo must bring him to the Yujin Guild before that happens. Speaking of him, Jinwoo couldn't extract the souls of the dead demons because their mana is contaminated, which is a pity since he had stacked hundreds. However, the hunter receives written permission to enter the second floor, then a huge light, probably the teleportation point, emanates from a specific spot in the dungeon, which, as Jinwoo comments, is gigantic, almost like an entire city within a single building. Walking would tire the hunter, so he summons the leader of the ice bears to serve as his mount. As soon as he mounts the animal, a horde of demons appears ahead, but the bear charges through and paves the way to their destination. Because of this movement, Jinwoo names the bear Tank. In the meantime, we head to the Hunters Association, a massive structure equipped with gyms and swimming pools. Amidst a few girls swimming, Chahat emerges from the water, capturing the attention of others with her beauty. However, all she can think about is an incident that happened once. During a meeting with Master Choi Jongin, she wanted to make the information about the flying ants public, but Choi responded that he had received an order from the association, as they believed disclosing this fact would only cause panic among the population. Either way, there's no need to worry. The priority is to increase the association's power to make it the country's largest guild and take on the responsibilities that come with it. Turning back to Jinwoo after killing another demon, he reflects on his fear that this dungeon was rank S when he got the key to enter it, but the demons living there seem to be no more than rank B. However, they always come in large numbers, and the further the human goes, the stronger the monsters get. Still, if Jinwoo can take down the demons carrying the permissions, he will be able to keep moving up floor by floor. That said, if the structure of the demon castle is the same as the original tower, there are 100 floors, and the hunter can only imagine the level of demons he will encounter at the last one. Now, more importantly, Jinwoo seems not to have enough food for such a long expedition, besides the promise he made to Jinna. So just like the battle against the demons, Jinwoo also races against time, but ultimately, he reaches the 10,000 souls set by the mission. The young man does not know how high he can climb in this dungeon, but either way, he moves forward. In doing so, he encounters the Lord of the Lower Floors, a demon known as the Volcano of Greed, guarding the 50th floor. Meanwhile, manager An Sangmin visits Jinwoo's house along with Park Heejin to try to recruit him for White Tiger, but finds only his sister at home, who says her brother went on a trip. An notes that Jinwoo has not participated in any recent raids and that the last location tracked by the association was the center of the urban area. Heejin is amazed to see that her partner can find out such things, and he explains that this is his job. In any case, the boy's whereabouts are now unknown. Returning to him, Jinwoo Sung orders his army to leave the enemy leader to him, so the subordinates advance to fight the other opponents. The spectral mages shoot flames at the demons, while Igris, the Blood Red, charges through the enemy ranks, causing a real havoc. Thanks to the increase in his intelligence, Jinwoo was able to enhance both his magical power and the number of soldiers he can summon. Putting that aside, the hunter wonders how long the leader of the demons plans to stay seated. Since the enemy refuses to move, the human plans to take the initiative. However, before he could realize it, the Volcano of Greed surges at an unbelievable speed to attack Jinwoo. Jinwoo reacts quickly and delivers a punch that sends the demon flying, startling the young man himself, who wonders how much strength he put into his attributes to manage that. Faced with the damage incurred, the Volcano of Greed is filled with rage and activates its Cerberus ability. When the giant demon charges at Jinwoo, the man orders Iron to send his shield to him. With the shield raised, Jinwoo is able to block the giant's heavy mace, but the intense combo suffered starts to worry the human about the health of the shield. Defending patiently, the man waits for a single opening to counterattack, and at a certain movement of the demon, he manages to break free from the combo and leaps towards the enemy's neck, but the volcano immediately turns and strikes with its club. On reflex, Jinwoo activates the hand of the ruler and absorbs the impact to the point of not dying right there. After avoiding his end, Jinwoo wonders if this monster can read his thoughts, while imagining that the only place he could inflict damage would be on its head. Either way, first he needs to restrict these agile and indecipherable movements of the giant, so Jinwoo uses the rage of the volcano of greed to lure it to a building. As soon as it approaches, Jinwoo quickly climbs the structure, while the demon cannot stop and crashes into it. Having this advantage, the hunter finally hits the opponent with his dagger, winning the fight and being rewarded with a fragment of the Tree of Life. Meanwhile, Dong-soo arrives in the United States to interrogate Sung Il-won, but the first to ask is the interrogated. He wants to know how much humans know about the existence of portals and magical beasts, for all this is nothing compared to the worst catastrophic force that has finally awakened, and Sung Il-won's goal is to prevent a disaster from happening. Ignoring the one who believes to be just a magical beast, Dong-soo asks if the prisoner still remembers the name of his wife or any of his 2 children. Then the man replies that one of his children is named Jinwoo. That said, Dong-soo promises that the 2 will meet again in Hell. And speaking of Hell, Jinwoo Sung advances with his army through the upper floors and eliminates Metis, the sole guide. Returning to the interrogation, the surroundings have turned to ruins. According to officials involved in the case, this is what happens when 2 rank S hunters come into conflict. In fact, they were lucky not to have been injured because Hwang Dong-soo was defeated in the blink of an eye. At that moment, Jinwoo Sung's food finally runs out on the 75th floor. Despite lamenting, he recognizes that he got good items on the expedition: an earring won from the boss of the 50th floor and a necklace from defeating a skeleton. In addition, the Mirror of Greed will be quite useful for his spectral mages, and lastly, he gained a key that he is not quite sure what it opens. In any case, Jinwoo's priority is to gather the 3 fragments of the Tree of Life. The first he obtained by defeating the Volcano of Greed. The second is the water from the Echo Forest, won by killing Metis. Thus, the last piece remains for Jinwoo Sung to save his mother. After stepping through the portal from which he entered, Jinwoo checks his inventory where he finds 2 materials needed to craft the Elixir of Life. Now, all that remains is to find the purified blood of the Demon King, but to obtain this item, he needs to be fully prepared. Following his expedition through the Demon Castle, the protagonist has gained several levels, but officially he is still ranked as E, so he cannot participate in missions beyond that level. For this reason, Jinwoo Sung decides to reassess his rank. The next day, at the Hunters Association headquarters, Hyun Kitchell is eager to discover what kind of talents they will recruit today. Watching a man in a purple shirt among the candidates, he suspects the guy is rank C. In front of him, the individual appears to be rank E, looking for the next person to assess. Kitchell is startled by what he sees and immediately calls Bak to inform him that Hyun Kitchell, assistant manager Sung, has come to reevaluate his rank. Upon hearing this, the boss rushes down. Returning to the protagonist, he hears the man in the purple shirt trying to calm the other candidate, arguing that from what he's heard, the assessment process is quite straightforward. In fact, the other candidate admits he needs the money he could earn as a hunter, so he might get his wife and daughter back who left him behind. Then the man in purple explains that as long as you are assessed as rank D or above, the guild will offer you an invitation and everything will be fine. That is, as long as you don't stay at rank E, you can make a living off of it. Hearing this conversation, Jinwoo finds it ironic that he still belongs to the lowest level and smiles slightly. Soon after, the boy is called for revaluation and places his hand on the black globe. The professional monitoring the process is surprised by an error message on the system, so she tries to repeat the procedure, but the same fault occurs. The director enters the room to ask what's going on, and when the employee shows him, he notes that it's not a mechanical failure. In fact, the machine is incapable of assessing this hunter, as his magical power exceeds what it can analyze. In other words, this young man is the 10th rank as hunter in the country's history. Meanwhile, Choi asks how the research on the flying ants is going, and Jinchul reports that the department conducted an autopsy comparing the internal structure and residual magical power of the old specimen with this new one, but it will still take some time for any conclusions to emerge. Then, Choi mentions that he heard about the Red Portal incident and that the White Tiger Guild allowed a non-member to participate in this raid and even let him defeat the boss. The master wants to know who this person is, so Jinchul explains that he was present on the last day of the incident, but didn't stay until the end, so he doesn't know many details. Choi responds that it's a pity and comments that the hall is noisy. Jinchul thinks it's the Awakened being assessed, but decides to check just in case. Before the manager goes, the guild master highlights that he's curious and will accompany his colleague. In the hall, Everyone is in disbelief that a hunter before them cannot be assessed by the headquarters machine. When the news spreads, the entire crowd is riveted on Jin Woo-sung, who is talking with the director. He asks the young man to return in 3 days to attempt the evaluation again. Amidst this, Kitchell reflects that this is happening exactly as An said it would. At that moment, Master Choi Jong-in enters the hall and draws the attention of those around. According to Jinwoo, this guy is the pinnacle of fire-type mages known as the Supreme Hunter. Similarly, Choi assesses the young man with his insane amount of mana enveloping his body and concludes that he is the reason for such a commotion there. By the way, Jinwoo begins walking towards the representative of the Guilds Association, who asks if the young man has joined any clans and if they could talk about it. However, Jin Woo-sung completely ignores the master and walks out. Embarrassed, Choi asks Jinchul if he had already told Jinwoo who he was, and the manager confirms. Thus, the master begins to believe that he's not all that. At that moment, Baek arrives running, then Choi surmises that the president of the White Tiger in person appeared because of that kid. Thus, he presumes that Jinwoo was responsible for conquering the Red Portal. Similarly, seeing Master Choi passing without saying anything, Baek also realizes that he just discovered the truth. At night, Jinwoo visits his mother in the hospital and feels she might wake up at any moment. With this in mind, even though she is unconscious, the son asks the woman to wait for him a little longer. Exiting the room, Jinchul was waiting for Jinwoo, saying that the young man made him realize how blind he was. The surveillance team's job is to observe the hunters and punish those who break the law. Usually, Jinchul trusts his own judgment, but everything seems turned upside down. Uninterested in the conversation, Jinwoo asks if he really needs to be monitored, and the manager explains that yes, but not as a criminal. In fact, surveillance is the only team capable of resolving incidents with hunters, but when it comes to a rank S, even they can't do much. With that said, the man informs that someone wants to meet Jin Woo-sung. At that, Jinwoo turns again, while Go Gunhee emerges through the shadows with a friendly smile on his face, introducing himself as the president of the Hunters Association. First of all, he congratulates the young man for reaching rank S because once the machine has that problem, it means the hunter has reached the ultimate level. Nevertheless, they ask the boy to return in 3 days to keep in touch with such a talented hunter, since Gunhee's guild cannot compete with the bigger ones in terms of payment or fame. For example, Woo Jinchul is one of the best hunters they have, but still he is rank A. Thus, Go Gunhee goes straight to the point and offers a prominent position to Jinwoo in the association, because nowadays the nation's greatest defenders are not the state, but the hunters. This core is made up of the 5 largest guilds, which are almost never at peace with one another. In fact, wherever Jinwoo decides to join, it will cause an imbalance among the major guilds. In turn, the association is the 6th power and has taken on the role of keeping the 5 largest in line, which is an indispensable service for the country. For this reason, Go would like Jinwoo to be part of the team. Listening carefully to each detail, Jinwoo stops to reflect seriously, as a job at the association is very secure and influential in society, especially considering that Go Gunhee was the first S-rank hunter to awaken in Korea, so much so that no one believes he is over 80 years old, given his enviable physique. Although he is retired, the president is on the same level as Jinwoo, even though the boy tries so hard to level up. In other words, accepting this job will change Jinwoo's life forever. However, the young hunter refuses the offer because his place is in the dungeon fighting against magical beasts. Seeing truth in the boy's eyes, the association's president feels a pang in his heart and thinks that if he were 10 years younger, he could stand side by side with this youth in a dungeon. One way or another, he does not insist and lets the boy go, who asks to return home considering that his sister is alone. With Jinwoo's departure, Gunhee tells Jinchul to cancel his schedule for today because he doesn't want anything to disturb the same bad feeling he had when he discovered that not even an S-rank healer could make up for his old age anymore. With this in mind, he invites his friend for a drink. On the way home, Jinwoo notices that the association mainly deals with rank D and E dungeons, and that he needs to level up as quickly as possible to be able to heal his mother. The next morning, Dong-soo wakes up all broken in a hospital bed. Even seeing the terrible condition of the man, a guy arrives asking if Il-won-sung is really a magical beast. About this, Dong-soo has no doubt. With that explained, the other man warns that the command center is after that guy, but he thinks they won't be able to catch someone even Dong-soo couldn't handle. Left alone, the businessman remembers Il-won's foot on his chest, telling him to leave his family alone for his own good. Otherwise, not even death will save Dong-soo from Il-won. Remembering this, Dong-soo feels the humiliation of defeat physically hurting his body, so he decides to go after the guy again with the appropriate equipment. In the case, the man was referring to an artifact, which are pieces of equipment so high level that no artisan could create them. With the increasing number of hunters, you can even find several artifacts for sale at online auctions, something that Jin Woo-sung researches in search of one for himself. But the problem is that this item is too expensive for anyone to buy. Needing better equipment to return to the demon castle, Jinwoo thinks about selling the Orb of Avarice, but such a powerful item would raise questions about how an E-rank hunter got hold of such a thing. Amid this, the boy sees that there is a group of miners hiring hunters for an A-rank raid. Meanwhile, Gunny accesses Jinwoo's data from 4 years ago, when his photo was still very different from today. Also for this reason, the president asks if the boy might have faked his rank, and Jinchul replies that there are records of Jinwoo being seriously injured several times, so it's hard to believe he did that. By the way, he has been covering the treatment of his mother's eternal sleep and his sister's studies. Go comments that you don't see this dedication in young people nowadays, and Jinchul sees a record that Jinwoo joined a team of miners for a raid, and Gunny decrees that it's hard to predict the actions of this kid. When he arrives at work, the boss asks if Jinwoo is rank E, which he confirms. Then he asks if he has experience with mining, and the answer is no. Imagining that the hunter is the combat type, the boss figures he shouldn't worry about the physical form of the worker. He says there are many guys around like Jinwoo Sung, so just relax and everything will be fine. When the man leaves, Jinwoo reflects that more difficult raids require a certain degree of specialization. For example, the attack team takes care of the magical monsters, the mining team extracts the mana crystals, and the collection team removes the carcasses of the monsters. Although there are many people involved, Jinwoo thinks the profit is worth it, even though dungeons of such a high level have dangers hard to imagine. Speaking of which, hearing a fearsome roar coming from inside the cave, Choi conjures an extremely powerful fireball that pulverizes the giant monsters in front of him. Then he asks the tanks to do their job, and the shield hunters close a barrier in front of the master. A fireball that reaches them is blocked by a joint spell from the shield bearers. Done with that, the group proceeds deeper into the dungeon. Nearby, Jinwoo hears that the attack team is leaving, so he realizes that everything in the dungeon has already been killed, except for the boss. When he crossed paths with Choi Jong-in yesterday, Jinwoo knew this guy was strong, but to clear an A-rank dungeon without breaking a sweat is just too much. In the meantime, passing by the miners is the second in command of the Hunters Guild, the 9th S rank in Korea, Cha-ha the ballerina. Immediately, she senses an unusual aura among the workers, even thinking that President Go might be around. Finally, as the attack team has done their part, it's time for the miners and collectors to get to work. Once inside, Jinwoo is more concerned about sensing a signal of magical power coming from the depths of the cave, probably emitted by the boss of this A-rank dungeon, stronger than Vulcan and Metis in the Demon Castle. Knowing this, the guy itches to go down there right now and test the power of such a monster. Around him, Jinwoo hears a group of miners mocking an E-rank newbie who joined the team, which makes it realize that low-level individuals will always be treated the same way. Moreover, when a guy bumps into Jinwoo and squares up to him, he quickly backs down as soon as the young man shows his mana-filled eye. Besides that, while he mines, other coworkers notice that Jinwoo is too strong to be such a low level, but anyway, that's a blessing from the mining crew. Later, it's lunchtime. Jinwoo Sung takes advantage of everyone leaving and plans to use this break to head to the boss chamber. He knows that if he defeats the boss, the portal will close, which will cause a big loss for the guild. But that doesn't mean he can't flick the monster a few times. However, at that very moment, Cha-ha appears, pressing a cloth against her nose and asking what the worker is doing there. Jinwoo lied about getting lost and ending up there, so the huntress told him to leave since this was the boss's chamber, and if the boss were provoked, the whole team would be in great danger. Reflecting on this, Jinwoo realized that the rumors about Cha-ha were not exaggerated because she approached him without him even noticing. Suddenly, the man turned to the woman and she thought she was going mad, for she could swear he had been holding a gun, but had vanished. Eventually, he walked past her calmly, but Cha-ha noticed something off and asked the collector to wait a moment. When he stopped, the woman literally sniffed him, leaving him embarrassed. She noticed this guy didn't smell like the other hunters, which was quite strange. On the contrary, this man even had a pleasant scent. Thinking about it, she saw his E-rank identification and asked the worker to be careful on his way back and let him go. When Jinwoo rejoined his team, they said he was lucky to have gotten so close to Cha-ha, as everyone else could only dream of such an opportunity. According to them, her task was to protect the workers in the dungeon, and she covered their lunch breaks. The only odd thing about her was that Cha-ha didn't like the smell of hunters, which is why she always wore a cloth over her nose in the dungeons. On this, Jinwoo reflected that the woman had acted differently with him for some reason, as if he wasn't a hunter, just as Baruka had noted at the red portal. Jinwoo guessed it might be because he was the player. Undoubtedly, having the system on his side provided some significant advantages, though he didn't fully understand what it meant to be the player. After the shift, Jinwoo received his payment for the day, and the boss said they could leave early thanks to the newcomer, who had proven to be exceptional at work and very productive. Honestly, the boss had never seen anyone as naturally skilled as Jinwoo Sung, which is why he offered him a permanent position on the team. Jinwoo thanked him for the opportunity, but explained he had only come because he had some free time today. Thus, the boss invited him to come back just tomorrow, as there would be a double raid. One rank A and another rank C. Jinwoo thought about the offer, remembering his revaluation was only after tomorrow, so he agreed to show up, exciting the boss enough to offer double the payment. That night, Chaha contacted the association seeking information about Jinwoo Sung, but discovered that this hunter's data was locked. Moreover, she learned that Master Choi had requested information about this member of the organization. For some reason, Jinwoo's information was locked, even though he wasn't high level. Later, as she lay down to sleep, the woman couldn't stop thinking about this case. After all, that man had behaved strangely in the dungeon, and now that she knew Master Choi was also after him, the huntress felt something was definitely off, especially since Jinwoo had a pleasant scent. Speaking of the man, he arrived for work, pleasing the team with his presence as he was a true human machine when it came to resource extraction. Seeing those smiles, Jinwoo was thrown back to memories of the double dungeon he had participated in that time when everything had indeed begun. When work began in earnest, the guy continued to impress and meet expectations, showing such efficient work that the workers could rest longer before the rank later on. At lunchtime, the boss again invited Jinwoo to join the team and promised to pay 5 times the usual salary. But before any response, a hunter approached the collecting team. It was Captain Sung Ki-kun, who wanted someone from the mining team on loan, stating that whoever accepted would receive a hazard pay addition. On this, the team leader remembered that his people weren't skilled enough to closely follow such a dangerous raid, so the issue that it wasn't even about the money. However, Jinwoo Sung offered to go with the captain, leaving his colleagues dumbfounded and emphasizing that risking life for money wasn't worth it, but Jinwoo stood by his decision. Accordingly, the captain formally introduced himself to the young man, who did the same. Outside the portal, some hunters expressed some concern, but the captain assured them they wouldn't have major issues as being from the secondary team. The main one had already eliminated all the stronger monsters. Surveying the surroundings, Jinwoo noticed there were 6 rank A hunters and 3 rank Bs, and he found it impressive that the guild could send such a qualified secondary team for this job. Inside, the man felt less magical power than in yesterday's dungeon, but a strange premonition took hold of his body, the same thing he had felt at the red portal. Noticing the collector was uneasy, a woman from the group tried to calm him, saying that the captain of the team and the other hunters were very strong. In the midst of this, Sung Ki-hun reflected that he would officially become captain after this raid, and that he might not have the strength of the master and the vice master of the guild, but he was an extremely competent and capable S-rank hunter. Suddenly, the team heard a sound and instantly went on the defensive, even though no order had been given, which impressed Jinwoo Sung. Then red eyes emerged from the depths of the dungeon and approached a pack of jackals that attacked the hunters at once. The fighters reacted accordingly and demonstrated their full strength in battle, with each member displaying characteristics that complemented those of the others, forming a team visibly well prepared for any situation. After the victory, they wondered what jackals were doing in a rank A dungeon, as they were rank C monsters and usually didn't survive in such a hostile environment. Then Jinwoo saw that the canines were wearing collars and imagined they had been domesticated by someone and trained to serve as hunting dogs. Speaking of which, heavy footsteps were heard in the vicinity, until a group of larger, intimidating-looking orcs appeared. Without mincing words, the leading orc hurled his spear with force at the rival team's captain, causing an impressive crack in his shield. At that moment, the team's tank provoked the opponents to focus on him, but the skill didn't work, and the orcs attacked the back row, but a mage repelled the adversary with a fireball. Despite this, the orc struck showed immense magical resistance and barely suffered any damage. A witch binds another monster with her magic, but given its immense strength, she can only hold it captive for a few seconds. The wizard summons 2 flame warriors to fight alongside him, but even though it's a powerful spell that consumes a lot of mana, his summons don't seem to make much difference in the fight. The group's fighter shows off her hand-to-hand combat techniques, but soon she is thrown against the wall and takes significant damage. Immediately, the healer is called to that part of the battlefield, but there are too many orcs and she's already occupied. To avoid being completely surrounded, the captain orders his subordinates to split into groups of 3 and scatter, since just one of these orcs is enough to go head-to-head with an A-rank hunter, meaning the B-rank members stand no chance. As expected, one of the lower-level team members has his arm torn off, forcing the witch to intervene to save her companion's life. With cover, the healer rushes to regenerate the fighter's arm, but the arrival of an even taller orc behind her makes her fear for her life. However, some unknown force suddenly appears and drives the monster to death. As the hunters faced the orcs, they realized they were getting slower. This was because someone or something was moving through the battlefield like a ghost, tearing at the orcs' joints, limiting their movement, and making the contest much easier. Although not part of the team, Jin Woo-sung did not want to see these people die, so he helped stealthily so that no one would discover it was him who turned the tide. With the advantage, the team manages to win the fight. Afterwards, the healer asks the leader if he noticed anything strange during the fight, and the captain confirms that he did. He asks if it was Gina whom intervened in that way, but she replies that she couldn't possibly do such a thing as she only has attack magic and telekinesis. Moreover, the other mages are all focused on firepower, so no one there could act so stealthily. With that, the witch looks directly at Jin Woo-sung, as she knows well it was him, but imagines he has his reasons for not wanting to show his face and lets him remain hidden for now. Finally, the team discusses whether they should proceed or not, as this dungeon proved to be far more dangerous than they anticipated. Jinwoo imagines that the captain wants to show off and move forward, but to his surprise, Sum Ki-hoon announces a retreat, relieving the other expedition members. However, when they reach the portal to leave, a barrier blocks their passage. The witch commits to undoing this block, but warns that she will need time to do so. Moreover, she thinks to herself that if there is magic of this level in this place, leaving was definitely the right decision. Speaking of which, all the hunters feel a suffocating surge of magical power, so the witch hurries to perform the procedure as quickly as possible, as the general feeling was that something very bad was going to happen at any moment. Similarly, Jinwoo reflects that the magical power is so intense that even the B ranks noticed it, so he doesn't understand why no one felt this pressure from outside the portal. Suddenly, some group members suffer a violent reaction and begin to bleed on their own, while the aura of the blockade penetrates their bodies like a cursed trap. Just then, when the other comrades turn around, a massive horde of orcs is lurking, with about 50 armed warriors. Despite this sinister and oppressive atmosphere, the human captain steps forward and attempts to engage in dialogue with the enemy leader. After all, he knows well that a direct fight would only result in his group's death. Likewise, the orc leader approaches and lets out a roar in the man's face, speaking some words in an unknown language with his demonic voice. As a result, all the orcs repeat the words in unison, as if performing a ritual. The head of the orc leader starts to spin frenetically inexplicably, until his eye shines intensely, doubling in intensity. Then he announces in the human's language that his name is Karvelgen, and that he wanted to meet these hunters. Maintaining a confident posture, Kyun asks if Karvelgen was responsible for blocking the exit, and the orc confirms, boasting that he's a proud master of curses. The captain then inquires if there's anyone in that cave more powerful than him, and Karvelgen laughs arrogantly, assuring that no one there can surpass him. Finally, Orc Chief makes a proposal. Either the humans accompany him, or they will be killed right there. Although they seem to have two options, the truth is that Ki-hoon only has one, and he knows it. Therefore, he agrees to follow the orcs. Thus, the Orc Chief walks away, and the captain takes the opportunity to call Jin Woo-sung. When Jinwoo appears, he informs him that the group will attack as soon as the chief reappears. Although he does not know what will come of it, maybe Karvelgen will not be able to maintain the barrier while facing them. At that moment, Jinwoo must leave the dungeon and call the main team. He then asks if the captain intends to die there, and the answer is straightforward. The goal of a hunter is never simply to leave the dungeon, but to ensure that the portal is closed. Similarly, the healer approaches and asks the collector a favor. She hands him a written will and wants Jinwoo to take it to her family. After all, hunters are trained for this moment, but he has nothing to do with it and should escape. This feeling of despair reminds Jinwoo of the double dungeon, but on that occasion he was abandoned by the others. Unlike now, when these people are willing to let him be the only one to leave with his life. With this in mind, he collects the teammates' will and promises to deliver it. Outside the portal, Chaha tries to find Jinwoo, but as she can't, she asks the team chief where he might be. Then the man informs her that Jinwoo is working as a carrier inside the portal. Meanwhile, the expedition group follows the horde and arrives at a massive structure built by the orcs, who reveal themselves to be a relatively advanced and well-organized civilization. Soon, the hunters find themselves standing before the throne, where the king addresses them as human worms. Chaha reflects that an E-rank hunter volunteered for an A-rank portal, and she can't fathom what the kid is thinking. Moreover, she saw Jinwoo yesterday in front of the dungeon boss's room, apparently unarmed. Without a doubt, this man is suspicious. Because of this, the hunter decides to go back in to take another look, but first she borrows a weapon from the head of the collection team. The man hands her a pickaxe, as there's nothing more effective available, so she resigns herself to enter unarmed. The man questions if she's really going to do that and argues that it's better to enter with a pickaxe than empty-handed, so Chaha takes the tool back and enters the portal. Inside, the orcs bang their spears on the ground as if announcing something significant in their tradition. Observing the strength of these monsters, some hunters claim that this army could topple entire cities, especially the 4 that stand apart from the rest. Compared to the others, their aura is violently oppressive. Suddenly, Kargalgan, the orc chief, raises his hand and an absolute silence takes over the throne room. With sweat dripping down his face, Sum Ki-hoon ponders that his squad's goal is to close the portal, meaning they need to defeat this boss right there. As he removes his mask, Kargalgan unleashes a terrifying spell into the air and asks if the humans present are afraid of him. The hunters immediately feel the pressure and some tremble in terror, until the human leader asks why they were brought here. Without mincing words, the orc master replies that they will be killed one by one to serve as entertainment for the soldiers. Kuvun reflects that the lives of his allies are merely toys to be discarded at the hands of these orcs, while the monster chief notices that among the humans, one of them seems different for some reason, and that individual is Jin Woo-sung. Refusing to die in vain, Ki-hoon charges forward offensively and orders his companions to do the same, but as everyone was paralyzed by fear or by some spell, the leader charges alone with his sword drawn. At that moment, the orc chief conjures the Hymn of Protection, a magical shield that repels the attacker. Then he uses gravitational magic and gravity acceleration to lift the enemy high and slam him back to the ground with overwhelming force repeatedly. The companions watch helplessly, with a look of despair on their faces. From there, Jinwoo catches the captain and gently places him on the ground, explaining that this dungeon once belonged to the hunters, and he did not intend to interfere in this matter, but now everyone is in danger. When the team rushes towards the captain to see how he is or threatens to attack, but Jinwoo paralyzes him and throws the monster onto the ceiling. Having done that, the man asks if his comrades can leave all the magical beasts to him, and the captain with extreme difficulty grants permission. Kargalgan ridicules the human's arrogance and exhales an absurd amount of mana. For his part, Jinwoo acknowledges that he has never felt such a strong presence in his entire life, and it's a pity that the two are natural opposites. Regardless, the man conjures his army of shadows and assures that he will defeat the enemies. Outside the portal, the association's surveillance team has just arrived, surprising the miners. Woo Jinchul wonders why on earth Jinwoo was working on this collection team and for 2 consecutive days. The head of the miners asks why the Vigilant is there, and he asks where Jin Woo-sung is. Hearing the conversation, one of the miners approaches and says that there's something wrong with that guy because he keeps looking at everyone with a scary look. The chief advises that Jin Woo-sung is inside to help the expedition team carry the items. At that moment, Jinchul imagines that Jinwoo must have made up some excuse to become the expedition's porter. In any case, it's necessary to take a closer look at what this hunter is doing, so the inspector prepares to enter the portal, but before that, the mining chief warns that Cha-ha has just entered. In the midst of this, a strange aura passes through the inspectors via the portal, the same one exhaled by the leader of the superior orcs. Immediately, Jinchul orders his partners to perform the magic test again. Speaking of Cha-ha, she advances through the hostile territory of the monsters and notices that many have been defeated by Sum Ki-hoon's team, something she can't understand how was possible, given the high level of these creatures. However, if the aura that just passed is from the dungeon boss, the hunters are certainly in great danger. Meanwhile, the orc chief underestimates Jinwoo's innocence for facing his army with such small forces, but the human assures that the monster will regret underestimating his troops. With that, he activates the Monarch's Domain, a new ability he learned upon reaching level 70 in the demonic castle. Indeed, the shadow soldiers have become even stronger after the battle in that fortress. Amidst this, the other humans look at the team's porter and can't believe that someone of their race is capable of doing what is happening before their eyes. At that moment, Kargalgan orders his subordinates to attack. Iron reacts by destroying dozens of them in seconds, while Agris does the same with even less effort. Similarly, Jin Woo-sung navigates through enemy lines with unstoppable speed, decapitating and slashing the superior orcs as if they were nothing. Looking around, Jinwoo notes that his infantry has managed to reach rank B as they are waging a worthy battle. That is, it takes 5 warrior shadows to take down an orc, but still it's considerable. Regardless, Jinwoo must reduce the number of orcs as quickly as possible. However, Kargalgan intervenes with the Fire Dragon's anthem and destroys several shadows, but Jinwoo conjures them up again and explains that they can be revived as many times as necessary. At that point, the orc chief casts the Anthem of Protection and hurls a massive mana rock at the main enemy. When he dodges, the orc levitates the debris around the hall and destroys other shadows, ensuring he will defeat them until Jinwoo's mana runs out. Following this, he chants the Anthem of Blazing Fire, wreaking havoc on the battlefield and forcing the hunters to flee for their lives. In the face of the opponent's strategy, Jin Woo-sung analyzes that this boss is keen on keeping a distance at all costs. Returning to the surveillance team, an inspector discovers that this rank, a portal, is extremely close to that rank as portal. With this discovery, Jinchul orders them to contact the Master of Hunters, as they need to prepare to support the team inside. In the war, the Orc Chief asserts that his orcs surpass Jinwoo's shadows in strength and number, and that his mana points are draining away as this conversation unfolds. Laughing at this, the man drinks a potion and announces that the time for true necromancy has arrived. Saying so, he resurrects the orcs that died in the battle and assures that all those still alive will meet the same fate. For the first time, Kargalgan shows apprehension as a strange static reaction takes over his body. He tries to understand why this is happening and why he is there. When he first opened his eyes in this place, a command echoed in his mind, and that command was, "Hunt the humans." The reasons behind it didn't matter, and Kargalgan simply obeyed the command. Once again, he follows that order, but this time he sends his special units into action. In the midst of this war, after learning everything that's going on, Master Choi comments to his assistant that only some Ki-hoon's team would have been enough in this dungeon, and that if a dungeon break occurs, it will be a bigger disaster than the Jeju Island incident, but they still have time to fix this. Therefore, he orders the guild's strongest to be gathered and sent to this portal immediately. The assistant reports that she has already sent an emergency call to all rank A and above, and Choi thinks that, depending on the situation, they might have to ask for help from the White Tiger and the Reapers. The woman warns that this will not be good, but that's why the Master does not want the problem to reach an even greater level. In the throne room battle, Iron fights one of the Orc Chief's favorites and decapitates him with his axe, while Igris takes down the second after an exchange of blows and faces the third next. Jinwoo comments to himself that his personal guards seem to be at an advantage, while the Orc Chief can't believe that this is true. The other hunters regain their courage and prepare to assist until the Orc Chief casts the Anthem of Agony and Blindness all at once to prevent the intervention of the other humans, causing massive damage to them. Tired of the insolence of the strongest among them, the superior orc finally rises from the throne and casts the Anthem of Sleep and Disability around Jinwoo's Sung, but the magic circles are shattered before they can take effect. Through the blessing of the great spell Conjurer Candiaro, Jinwoo is now immune to toxic conditions, curses, and the like. Undeterred, the orc casts the Guardian's Anthem, but Jinwoo brings his spectral mages into the fight, who join to form a massive fireball that turns into a small blue flame focus, piercing the orc's shield and hitting him squarely. At that moment, Chahai arrives at the throne room and sees all the pandemonium. She runs towards the hunters and is relieved to see that the captain, though injured, will be okay. She asks her companions what's happening, but not even the hunters are sure. Enraged at being wounded for the first time in battle, the Orc Chief casts the Anthems of Wrath, Strength, and Giants, increasing his size to a colossal level. However, as he tries to step on the human as if he were an insect, he fails to see Jinwoo easily escape. The man confesses that he is fed up, especially since he doesn't much care for giants. Feeling ridiculed, the orc launches the dragon's Fire Anthem, but misses the first fire shot. Unsatisfied, he creates dozens of magic circles around the hall that repeat the same technique, launching a fiery inferno that drags practically everyone in its path, whether enemies or allies. Having done this, Kargalgan asks if the human still dares to challenge him, even after what he has seen, but Jinwoo answers yes without a second thought. Taking advantage of his smaller size, he leaps unseen and pierces the giant orc's eye with his dagger. Furious, Kargalgan conjures the Fire Anthem and greatly elevates his power of destruction, essentially turning the entire battlefield into an erupting volcano. Remaining calm, the man ventures among the endless flames and manages to escape the deadly heat. When he moves far enough away to not be hit by the fire pit, Jinwoo pulls a chain from the wall and ties the enemy's arm with it. When Kargalgan pulls the chain, Jinwoo uses the momentum to fly around the orc and bind him entirely, causing Kargalgan to fall on the spot. Meanwhile, Wu Jinchul arrives and informs Chaha that he came to help, but seeing what Jinwoo Sung was capable of, realizes it was unnecessary. Chaha reflects that even the surveillance team came after this guy, and that certainly he not only has the power of an elite hunter, but also masters summoning magic. By the way, she asks if Jinchul knows the young man, and he responds that they are acquaintances, but only just. Meanwhile, Jinwoo approaches Kargalgan, who has returned to his original size, and remarks that conjurers lose when their protection is broken. Determined to go down fighting, the orc shouts that his body cannot be destroyed and fiercely battles against Jinwoo's summons, but ultimately he is brought down and dealt a fatal blow by iron. After defeating the dungeon boss, Jinwoo gains 2 levels. Collecting all the items would be a bit much, but he doubts anyone would mind if he extracts Kargalgan's shadow. Upon doing so and mastering the monster's essence, it's time to choose a name for it. Jinwoo can't remember the beast's name as it's quite hard to pronounce, so he decides to call it Tusk due to its tusks. The system shows that this orc is of elite knight rank, something the protagonist had never seen before. In addition to Tusk, The other superior orcs will also be of great help, and Jinwoo stores them all with a smile on his face. At that moment, Jinchul approaches Jinwoo, whose presence the director had not even noticed, and realizes that everyone there saw what he did. The group members ask how on earth a porter managed to do all that, but Jinchul protects the boy by declaring the matter secret and asking everyone present to keep what they saw today confidential. Anyway, before the wardens accompany Jinwoo out, Hoon thanks him for all the help he provided, and all the team members join together to bow before the hero of the day. In turn, Jinwoo returns the will of the group member who thought she was going to die. After he leaves, Shaha worries whether the man thought she was odd for holding a pickaxe. The next day, at the association's headquarters, Master Choi tries to understand what happened, especially concerning the mysterious Jinwoo Sung. By the way, he wants to know from Ki-hoon who he thinks is stronger, Choi or Jinwoo. The captain asks back, considering that any expedition is done in groups, does Choi feel capable of conquering an A-rank dungeon alone? Honestly, Choi admits that would be impossible, which is embarrassing. In any case, the fact is that the association means Jinwoo Sung, and this has become clearer than ever after this incident. Meanwhile, Jinwoo meets with Jinhoo and asks if the friend has made up with his father after the fuss about being the master of the family guild, but this matter is much more delicate than it seemed. Outside the Hunters Association, the entire media was searching for Lee Min-sung, the man who has everything. Watching the intense media activity from within a car, Min-sung confesses that he enjoys this kind of attention. Then the car arrives, dropping off Baek Yoon-ho from the White Tiger Guild and Choi Jong-in from the Hunters Guild, causing the entire media to rush towards them to ask if they came to recruit Lee Min-sung. However, Baek has no idea who that person is. Choi responds that Min-sung has already signed with the Reapers Guild, so they were there to discuss other matters, which drives the press away as they were only interested in a story about that man. Left in peace, Baek mentions to Choi about the A-rank portal issue that almost escalated to S-rank, but the association's master doesn't think it was as serious as the red portal incident that cost a Tiger White A-ranker's life. Regardless, Jinwoo's involvement in these incidents has shaken up the guild structures, and the truth is both guild masters are now seeking an S-rank hunter, intensifying a rivalry between their two organizations as both are after this mysterious youth. Suddenly, a man with the Reapers Guild emblem approaches and asks if they are there to steal Min-sung from them. But the S-ranks angrily reply they couldn't care less about that guy. Away from them, Jinwoo has just arrived for his re-evaluation, but he doesn't understand what's happening around him. In the classroom of Han Song-yai and Jana Sung, the protagonist's sister, the girls in the class are all watching Min-sung's press conference on their phones, known for being a playboy and womanizer actor who used and betrayed several co-stars. Speaking of which, there's Lee Min-sung, brimming with confidence, declaring in the interview that he has awakened as a hunter, and his rank will be assessed today. Although he struggled against this role at one point, the young man feels ready to embrace the destiny he was born for. Moreover, he will fight for Lord Lim Ta-ju, master of the Reapers Guild. Extremely agitated, the press asks if it isn't rash for Min-sung to abandon his acting career, yet inside, the man knows well that he has already secured his A rank with a 2-year contract with the Reapers. In other words, he'll take on a mission or two during this time, then people will forget the scandals he was involved in, and afterwards he solidifies as an A-rank hunter in action. Suddenly, Jinwoo arrives at the roadside leading to the building, but a security guard pushes the hunter away because of the press conference. Jinwoo replies that he has an appointment with the association, but still, the security stops him from passing. Min-sung wonders who this jerk is that wants to get through, until President Go arrives and undermines the security's authority, stating it's not up to him whether the boy can enter or not, as he is his guest. Moreover, Go made it clear he didn't want any conference at that time. Having his moment completely cut off, Min-sung announces to the media that he will quickly check what's going on with the association, but Jinchul prevents the young actor from entering, stating that someone else is being re-evaluated at the moment and Min-sung must wait. Min-sung whispers to the inspector that one call from him could ruin the guy's career, but not caring at all, Jinchul responds that he does not appreciate Min-sung's lack of consideration one bit. Meanwhile, inside the building, the president tells Jinwoo that Choi and Baek came to await the result of the boys' re-evaluation in person, as they had been without an S rank for 2 years, therefore everyone is interested. Finally, Jinwoo is taken to the room where the re-evaluation will be conducted, but before that, the person in charge needs to confirm the nature of the young man's abilities as a hunter. That said, the evaluator asks what kind of powers Jinwoo has, and he replies that he can summon certain things. Surprised by this, President Go reveals that director Woo Jinchul has made a detailed report of Jinwoo's abilities, so it's crucial that he hides nothing. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jinwoo decides not to dodge and reveals hundreds of spectral shadow soldiers behind him. At that moment, both Choi and Baek reflect that this incredible power would obliterate them. After the re-evaluation process, Jinwoo waits until he receives the result, then gains a new identity as an S-rank hunter in the mage category. In the young man's mind, this is perfect, because now he can sell the Orb of Greed without looking suspicious. Then he can purchase equipment good enough to conquer the demonic castle. In the end, President Go confesses that he is eager to see what Jinwoo Sung will do with this S-rank strength. When Jinwoo leaves the room, he is greeted by Choi and Baek, who also congratulate him on the result and ask to have a word with the new elite hunter, but Jinwoo passes them, saying he needs to resolve other matters at the moment. However, as much as the two tried to warn him, he ends up opening the exit door without knowing what was coming. At that moment, Han-song tells Gina that her brother is on the live broadcast as she was watching the live transmission from the association's headquarters. Similarly, various characters learn from the TV that the protagonist has just become the 10th S-rank hunter in history, a news significant enough to cause a national stir, as it had been 2 years since anyone of that level had emerged since the last was Chaha. In the following scene, we see that Jinwoo informs his father that he could not bring Jinwoo to the family guild. According to the S-rank hunter, there was something he needed to resolve alone before anything else, and for that, he has to keep fighting and evolving until he has the necessary strength for it. Therefore, joining any organization would interfere. Because of this, Jinwoo actually asked Jinhoo to join him. The father says that the son would be quite selfish if he accepted the invitation and recalls that he was willing to let Jin-sung run this project, but even after everything that was planned, Jinhoo brought another proposal and, without having achieved anything, intends to abandon the responsibility and work elsewhere, which must be a joke. Hearing every word, Jinhoo remembers moments with his foster brother and apologizes to his father, but states categorically that he will indeed work with Jinwoo Sung. In that case, the father warns that the son must be prepared for the consequences. Returning to the media frenzy at the association's headquarters, Baek approaches Jinwoo and advises him not to exert himself too much in responding to the crowd and offers him a ride home. However, as soon as the leader of the White Tiger finishes speaking, Jinwoo makes an incredibly swift move, dodges the entire press by circling around them, and pulls his hood over his head to leave freely from the throng. At this, Choi remarks that despite being a mage type, the kid still possesses significant physical capabilities, while Bak can't believe he couldn't even keep up with that guy's speed. Back with Jinwoo, he begins preparing for the next challenge at the Hunter's auction, searching for artifacts to protect him from flames as he is heading into a very hot dungeon. The seller then shows him a cloak that can be worn over clothes, along with an easy-to-equip ring. Seeing the price, Jinwoo is shocked and asks if there's any discount, but the employee regrets that the value of these items cannot be reduced. However, if the customer can break a specific glass in the store, he can take the items inside for free. This glass is magically enhanced to withstand scratches from even A-rank hunters. Jinwoo approaches the glass and feels a flow of magical power, but it's nothing serious, so he concentrates a certain amount of mana in his right fist. Immediately, the seller says it was just a joke, since any vibration triggers the security, even if the glass isn't broken. Embarrassed, Jinwoo says he was also looking for daggers, so another employee steps forward, being responsible for these products in the store. Returning to the initial employee, he notices that Jinwoo left a crack in the glass, even though he hadn't touched it. Then, Jinwoo shows interest in a dagger of the level of Kasaka's Venomous Fang and asks for the price, but finds it too expensive for this weapon. So he uses one of his daggers to try selling it in the store. Evaluating the item, the employee is willing to pay 100 million for it, which impresses Jinwoo, considering this knife cost him less than 3 million gold. Anyway, since the Mega Assassin, rank B, is priced this way, perhaps he won't need to sell the Orb of Greed. Either way, the young man asks to use the store's restroom. At night, Baek reflects alone in his office that he knew Jinwoo Sung was strong, but this was beyond expectation. The magical power he felt in the evaluation lab, aside from the boy's physical ability, shows that his reawakening must be complete. However, since Jinwoo has become even stronger over time, Baek imagines he might not have reawakened. In fact, Jinwoo may be capable of growing stronger over time. The next day, Jaina is relieved to see that the press that was at her house's door is gone, because now she can go to school in peace. By the way, she complains that her brother should warn her next time he's going to appear on TV, but even he had no idea that would happen. Anyway, he tells her he's leaving tomorrow and will be out for about a week. In the midst of this, Jinwoo arrives all excited for the adventure and introduces himself to Gina as her brother's loyal squire. Then, Jinwoo takes the opportunity to explain that he will be busy all week with this guy because of works, so he squeezes Jinhoo's shoulder to make him agree with the narrative being set, and Jinhoo tells the exact same thing to the guy's sister. At night, when the other two were sleeping, Jinwoo takes the opportunity to summon Tusk and his elite subordinates, but is surprised to think he had 4 bodyguards, whereas there were only 3 there. Hearing this, one of the orcs points upward, and Jinwoo understands that since the 4th got stuck in the ceiling, it was not possible to extract his shadow. Nevertheless, the 3 that remain are strong enough, so the human puts one of them in charge and orders that Jaina be protected. Then Jinwoo leaves home to summon some shadow soldiers to start patrolling to make the city a bit safer. Speaking of which, in the middle of the night, a winged creature crosses the sky. When dawn breaks, the protagonist joins Jinwoo for a ride and explains to his friend that this job at the DS tower that was mentioned, in which he will be out of the house for a week, is like training. Jinwoo asks if the guy intends to get even stronger, being that he's already an S rank, and he responds without hesitation that's exactly it. Upon reaching the location that gives access to the demonic castle, the protagonist descends into the depths of this dungeon with his new ring enchanted with water and his cloak with wind, recently purchased to combat the fierce fire of this dungeon. One way or another, it's time to conquer this place. At this, Jinwoo notices that a message has arrived for him. His mission is to defeat Baron, the demonic monarch, who resides on the highest floor of this labyrinth. The reward is a soul swap runestone, which clearly seems to be a class ability. With a prize like this, Jinwoo feels even more motivated, so he resumes the quest from where he left off on floor 75. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's mother comments that she never imagined he would leave home on his own, and wants to know if her husband doesn't miss him. But the father responds that it's just a troublesome child leaving the nest, nothing more. However, as the man spoke, he feels a strange reaction in his body and completely loses consciousness until he faints. Back at the demonic castle, a colossal creature crosses one of the upper floors. To test his new toy, Jinwoo summons Tusk Spring into action. Without delay, with overwhelming power, the leader of the High Orcs strikes the enemy head-on and exterminates it without ceremony. Impressed by this, Jinwoo knows he needs to think carefully before using that move, so he decides to leave the Orb of Greed with Tusk for now. Hours later, Jinwoo's father wakes up in a hospital bed and learns from his wife that their son visited him while he was unconscious. Just then, the doctor arrives to explain that the businessman has contracted the eternal sleep disease, which begins with sudden bouts of drowsiness and ultimately leads to a persistent coma. According to the doctor, people who contract this disease have low resistance to mana, which occurs when they are exposed to this magical energy for extended periods. With that, the doctor asks if the patient often interacts with hunters in his daily life, to which he replies that his son works in that field. In the middle of the city, just before nightfall, 2 hunters are patrolling peacefully by the sea when they spot a strange winged insect staring directly at them. Turning back to Jinwoo, he creates 6 shadow squads to increase efficiency and gives them 2 orders. Each team must eliminate any enemy they encounter, and if they find an entry permit, they must notify their master. Naturally, some items might be left behind in the process, but this will allow them to advance much faster. At least that was Jinwoo's plan, but it has been 2 days since he arrived on the 80th floor, and the pace of the teams has significantly slowed. Seeing his MP drop, he knows his shadows are being destroyed. To see what's happening, he goes to Squad B, which has been wiped out. In Jinwoo's mind, this is quite strange since Tusk's squad was right next to Squad A, meaning Squad B, which was farther away, was defeated subsequently, which doesn't make sense. Perhaps the enemies avoided Tusk, the orc leader, to target a weaker troop. If they are selecting their targets based on the level of threat, the next targets will be the bears. Speaking of which, the bears indeed encountered the 4 demons that caused all this devastation. Demonstrating unparalleled skill, these demons advance and wreak havoc on the enemy lines once again. Watching the battle, Jinwoo now understands why his soldiers were defeated. At that moment, one of the superior demons attacks the human, who dodges each vile strike and responds with a kick that sends his adversary flying an absurd distance. Following that, 2 other demons attack and Jinwoo easily kills both with his dagger. After this, as he approaches the last opponent, Jinwoo finds the answer to a question he has always had. Do magical monsters feel fear? As he approaches the target, he realizes that indeed they do. Quickly, a fierce battle erupts between the 2, and the demon, revealed to be a woman, gives up after just a few seconds of dueling when Jinwoo Sung's dagger nearly pierces her face. Ironically, the demoness pleads for her life to be spared, and for some reason, Jinwoo recognizes that strangely human voice, prompting him to remove the helmet of his opponent. As her face is revealed, she insists that the human has won and she no longer wishes to fight. Jinwoo questions this sudden shift from attempting a lethal attack to begging for mercy, especially since the rest of her people are already dead. She replies that a knight's duty is to protect their lord, so they would be pleased if she remains alive. Jinwoo doesn't fully grasp what she means but decides to drop the matter and sheathes his weapon to leave. Yet, as he turns his back, the demoness seizes the chance to end him, but Tusk's protection song shields the human's rear, prompting him to demand an explanation for her deceit. She then kneels to beg for her life even more earnestly, promising Jinwoo anything he desires if she is spared. Thus, the man threatens her with Tusk and demands to know where the permission for the next floor is kept. She reveals that her clan guards a permission, and since he has spared her life, she would gladly hand it over, especially since she knows the location of permissions for higher floors and can show him the way if Jinwoo guarantees the safety of her and her clan. Realizing why he couldn't find what he was searching for no matter how many demons he defeated, Jinwoo decisively asks if he can truly trust the woman. Frightened by his more chaotic expression than the worst demons of that hell, the warrior confirms her trustworthiness with eyes wide with terror. With the agreement made, Jinwoo commits not to kill the demoness provided she delivers the permission. By the way, he inquires about her true nature. Meanwhile, on a secluded island, a gigantic insect devours a corpse while the man watches the terrifying scene until he is fatally struck by its massive leg. Back to Jinwoo, the demoness introduces herself as Ezel, the eldest daughter of the Rediru clan. In fact, this wasn't what the human had asked. He wanted to know something beyond the system mentioned by Baruka, the lord of the Ice Elves. So Jinwoo asks if demons like Ezel constantly hear a voice in their heads commanding them to kill humans. Contrarily, she hears a command saying, "Protect the place you are in," which began when her clan arrived there. Surprised by this information, Jinwoo inquires about their previous location and Ezel recounts that they were in the demon realm, but one day, they just appear here. Jinwoo questions what they were doing in the demon realm, then Ezel experiences a strange reaction in her body and, as if a robot, informs that they were all preparing for a war against an enemy so powerful that it required the union of all demons to confront. However, as Ezel was about to reveal what happened when the war seemed imminent, the internal system repeats twice that the permitted amount of information has been reached and the conversation will be terminated. With that, Ezel faints and almost hits the ground, but Jinwoo prevents her fall. In a following scene, the association discusses the appearance of flying ants on an island within the border with Japan. According to Wu Jinchul, 294 civilians were victims and 108 hunters were mobilized to contain the threat. 4 rank E, 1 rank C, and 1 rank B died in combat. This all against a single ant as emphasized by President Go. Jinchul adds that a rank hunter later arrived and delivered a single blow that ended the extermination. Thus, Go assumes the flying ants are at a rank 11 level, and the manager agrees that this matches the conclusions of the necropsy team's surveillance team. With that, Go reports that the attack occurred 120 kilometers from Jeju Island, and if the ants gain more flight control, they could reach the mainland. Therefore, the association should request joint action with Japan, while neighboring countries should be notified to prepare for the increased threat level. Given the current situation, the president announces the start of the 4th offensive operation on Jeju Island. Meanwhile, now conscious, Ezel apologizes for passing out suddenly, but Jinwoo shows genuine concern for the demoness's health. Besides, he wants to know if they are nearing their destination, and she confirms they are close to the Rediru clan's castle, where the much-desired permission is kept. Later, however, upon seeing the man within the domain, a demon on his throne panics and asks what Ezel has brought into their home, noting that the man's shadow houses a horde of soldiers. Honestly, Jinwoo is impressed that this individual noticed, but he keeps quiet. The throne demon makes it clear that if the human has deceived his daughter to try and take the castle, he will not leave alive, but Jinwoo recounts that he made an agreement not to harm anyone in exchange for the permission to advance. The demon lord swallows hard, reflecting that Volcano and Metis were killed by this man, meaning the Rediru clan likely stands no chance. Thus, he hands over the access permission to the 81st floor of the demon castle and hopes the human will leave now, but Jinwoo states he wants one more thing. Pulling Ezel forward, he expresses his desire to take the demoness with him, which outrages the lord, but the man clarifies he only wants her as his guide, knowing the locations of existing permissions on the next floors. Fuming with anger but realizing he can't say no, the clan lord asks if the human can ensure his daughter's safety, then accepts the demand when Jinwoo guarantees that Ezel will be safe. In the meantime, the association's necropsy team analyzes the carcass of a giant ant involved in the attack on the island near Jeju, until a guild master, observing the process, is called by an agent. Hours later, Jinwoo had already reached the 89th floor, and after defeating 2 more demonic knights and a noble demon, he closed this level and prepared to advance. Igris and Tank had risen in rank thanks to the levels they gained, and now could be compared to an S rank and an A rank, respectively. Ezel rummaged through her bag, which carried various gifts from home to offer in exchange in a potential negotiation, but so far without success. Jinwoo asked why she didn't take them back, but she explained that from the 90th floor upwards, All were governed by elite nobles, whose strength was incomparable to what the human had encountered so far, making it wiser to try to bargain for permissions rather than obtain them through violence. With that, Jinwoo asked if Isil would have made a deal with him if he had been weaker than her. Surprised by his question, she learned that this was precisely the point. The noble demons were always vying for hierarchy, and Jinwoo intended to place the Radiru clan at the top of it. By the way, Isil asked why Jinwoo had spared her family, and he replied that it was because he liked his new partner. Alone with his thoughts, Jinwoo realized it was more specifically because she reminded him of Jinho, and that he tended to work well with those who were a bit off. Moreover, he sent Isil back because the enemies ahead were too strong, and he had promised her clan leader that he would ensure his daughter's safety. However, the demoness wanted to see for herself what the human could achieve, so Jinwoo allowed her to continue at his side. As he advanced, Jinwoo noticed that the difficulty level had indeed spiked from the 90th floor, but even as each level increased in number and quality of enemies, the human proceeded steadfastly with his spectral army and overcame the challenges that impeded his path. As he climbed, all Jinwoo Sung thought about was gathering the ingredients for the elixir of life, and nothing would stop him from achieving this goal. Back at the headquarters of the Hunters Association, Master Choi informed Cha-Ha that the two had been summoned for the 4th raid in Jeju, along with President Baek of the White Tiger and all other S-rank hunters in the country. Cha-Ha realized that Jinwoo Sung was included in this mix, while the Master mentioned that this would be a joint operation with Japan, as the ants were capable of flying and could pose a risk to that country as well. The date of the mission was still being decided, but Choi believed it should start soon. To define the strategy to be used, they would have a meeting today with the hunters from Japan's largest guild. In the meantime, Jinwoo Sung finally reached the 100th and last floor of the demonic castle. Unbeknownst to him, a winged creature approached swiftly and, emanating surreal power, revealed its face to the enemy. Jinwoo knew it was Baron, the demonic monarch, who ruled the skies of hell with Kaisalin, a wyvern. For the first time in a long while, feeling the aura of that opponent, Jinwoo wondered if he was capable of defeating him. Baron's bloodlust directly affected Isil, who trembled in terror before such a threat. Jinwoo was impressed that this Lord of Lords was not only capable of commanding demons, since he also rode a wyvern. Suddenly, Baron summoned numerous portals around the battlefield, from which an endless horde of demons emerged, encircling the two opponents. Desperate, Isil asked what they were going to do now, and as the demons advanced at great speed, the sole human in the room invoked the monarch's domain, summoning his shadow army to face the enemies. Seeing Jinwoo's elite units in action, Isil couldn't believe that this man was capable of such feats, but nonetheless, the target now was none other than Baron, the demonic monarch, sovereign of this castle. Knowing this for a moment, Isil wondered which side she should be on in this war. With his indescribable power, Baron spat magical energy that invaded the clouds in the sky and formed a mana ring that rained down electric bolts, destroying dozens of Jinwoo's spectral soldiers before reaching Isil. Knowing she had no time to escape, the demoness closed her eyes and awaited her own death, but when she realized it, Jinwoo had protected her with his cape. Reflecting on what had happened, the man realized that these were not ordinary lightning strikes, as the area of effect was wide and caused stunning. Thus, even if his soldiers returned to life, they consumed much more mana when destroyed, and this would deplete the user's MP in the blink of an eye. Therefore, before it came to that, the human needed to find a way to handle the situation. Then, activating the stealth and sprint abilities, Sung shot toward the main target in an extraordinary burst, but even in stealth mode, he was seen by Baron, who blocked the hunter's sudden strike. At that moment, Baron threw the human directly to the ground and expelled a powerful electric blast from his mouth in the direction of the enemy. Jinwoo ran for his life from that attack that chased him wherever he fled. Fearing the worst, he called for help from Tusk and Igris, who responded with their own powers to ward off the wrath of the demonic monarch. Tusk, with his hymns of flames, managed to repel the electricity, while Igris decapitated Kaisalin by throwing his sword at the wyvern. From now on, Baron would fight without his winged mount. Returning to the headquarters of the association, a Japanese agent introduced herself as Hanekawa, while the man beside her was Goto Ryuji, master of the Sword Wielders Guild. Hanekawa would be Ryuji's interpreter. Present at the meeting, Goguni reflected that the Sword Wielders was the largest guild in Japan and the second largest in all of Asia, and included 7th-rank hunters. Hanekawa, speaking for the leader of this guild, informed them that there were two crucial points for this joint operation. One was the life expectancy of the ants, which grew rapidly after hatching but lived for about a year. Thus, if they killed the queen ant, the rest would die within that time frame. The other point was their behavior. As discovered in other raids, the ants were attracted to the strongest enemies with the highest magical power. Thus, the operation should use these two factors against the insects. With that said, Ryuji Goto announces that out of the 11 test-rank members in his guild, 10 will participate, including himself. The Koreans are startled by this information, while the Japanese explains their strategy. They will draw the ants' attention, while the Koreans must eliminate the queen. Wu Jinchul remembers that the Japanese will have to face thousands of ants simultaneously, but Ryuji believes this won't be a problem since artificial intelligence simulations have shown that this plan has the highest chance of success. With this, Gokuni accepts the plan. Meanwhile, on the 100th floor of the demonic castle, the battle rages with such fury and intensity that Jinwoo barely has time to replenish his mana with potions. Tusk and Agris launch their full power against Baron, but even though they are extremely powerful, it becomes clear that the Demon Monarch is on another level. After being incredulous that his fatal strike was blocked, Jin Woo-sung is seized by the head by Baron. But just when he is about to be killed, Tusk manages to protect his master, giving him a chance to plunge the dagger into the demon's arm. Tusk, Igris, and Iron unite to subdue the most powerful enemy, yet his strength was so unbelievable that he managed to free himself from all of them at once. Moreover, as if that wasn't enough, Jinwoo's mana finally runs out, leaving him without his army in the face of the most powerful enemy he has ever faced. Without delay, a nearly invisible duel begins, given the imperceptible speed of the two combatants. Despite Jinwoo showing great agility in this battle, he soon gets surprised and loses his daggers in a strike from Baron. Using brute force, he manages to prevent the demon from hitting him with his swords, yet Baron threatens to spit out another electrical discharge that would end the fight. Seeing that the worst is about to happen, Easel throws her weapon into the air as a way to draw the Demon Monarch's attention. The tactic works and causes a distraction, allowing the human to leverage everything he has invested in the strength attribute and the Dominator's touch. He then pulls the demon's arms with such force that he tears the limbs off. After letting out a roar of pain, Baron prepares the electrical discharge, but Jinwoo reacts quickly with a punch to the chin of the monster that bursts his head open and sparks a beam of energy that shoots into the sky. Having done that, the system notification arrives. You have defeated Baron, the Demon Monarch, and obtained his soul. When the fight finally ends and the sky clears, Jinwoo collapses to the ground and tells Easel to go home. After all, the one who rules the demonic castle from now on is the Radisu clan. Moved, Easel corrects that the name is Radiru, but thanks him for everything he has done for her family. In the following scene, Jinwoo can hardly believe he has purified the blood of the Demon Monarch. From now on, he finally has all the ingredients to develop the elixir of life. However, what the hunter didn't know was that the success rate and the quantity depended on his intelligence attribute. Seeing the man's dissatisfaction, Easel asks if he is okay, but without answering her question, he decides to create the item right there and try his luck. The man is filled with apprehension as he awaits the outcome of the item's forging. Regardless, the attempt is successful, but Jinwoo isn't sure if this alone will be enough to finally cure his mother's eternal slumber. At that moment, Iron arrives with the wyvern's severed head as if he were a cat bringing a dead mouse to its master. Immediately, Jin Woo-sung commands, "Rise," and the dragon becomes a spectral shadow in the army of the former worst hunter in the world. Jinwoo tries to remember what the monster was called, but since the name doesn't come to mind, he starts calling the dragon Kaizo. Easel is excited because they can return soon with the help of the winged beast. Moreover, she suggests throwing a party upon their return, as her father will surely be pleased. For his part, being honest with himself, Jinwoo just wants to test the elixir as soon as possible. Speaking of which, he seeks out the runestone, one of the mission's rewards, and breaks it with his hand. This grants him the ability Shadow Exchange, where the caster can swap places with one of his shadow soldiers, wherever they may be. Excited by this technique, Jinwoo drops his cloak on the ground and informs Easel that she will have to return alone as the Radisu castle will be out of his way. With that said, she threatens to say something to the human, but by then, he had already swapped his body with his shadow soldier. After performing the procedure, Jinwoo reflects that he indeed swapped with a soldier who was on patrol, and considering this ability has a 3-hour cooldown, he thinks about the best way to get home. With an idea in mind, the man conjures Kaizel and flies through the skies. Meanwhile, Bo is now at work discussing the attack plan on the ants. The strategy is that their hunter's magical power will serve as bait for the ants, then a special signal will be sent to disrupt the collective mind of the insects. At the same time, they should take advantage of the soldier's absence from the colony to place a group inside the anthill to eliminate the queen. Regarding this, Wu Jinchul questions whether the signal will really work as they need it to. Wu admits he has some doubts about the plan, but since the analysts approved it, they need to try. Moreover, if the signal fails, there is a well-planned strategic retreat in place. Thus, it is the association's task to prepare their hunters so that everything goes as planned when things heat up. Putting that aside, he asks if Jinchul has contacted Jin Woo-sung, but the inspector confesses he has not yet. In another part of the city, Baek is having a drink with Min Byung. Amid the young healer's lighthearted jokes, Baek reflects that this S-rank is one of the few who managed to retire young and without any serious injuries. The two were partners, and if there's one thing Baek remembers, it's that the guy's sense of humor hasn't changed at all, still as quirky as he was. Amid this, Byung asks his buddy if he's really going to a certain place, and he confirms that he is. The healer asks if he's sure, even after what happened with Unsuk, but it's precisely for that reason that the leader of the White Tiger is going, because if nothing is done about these ants, what happened on Jeju Island could happen to the entire country. Byung jokes that his friend had never played the Patriot before, so his partner replies that he needed to go anyway, so he found a cool excuse. Imagining that a certain person talked about it, the healer already makes it clear that he's not going in any case, and that it's no use trying to persuade him. However, Baek responds that he only came because he wanted to see his former companion, as this might be his last chance. With that, Byung lowers his head as if agreeing even without saying. Beyond this issue, he reveals that he is going to take a public service exam because he can no longer stand this kind of life with blood everywhere, so he wants to work peacefully for the government. The problem is that he only knows a bit about history after all, as Baek well knows he has always been good at history and has always enjoyed period dramas. Baek wonders what one thing has to do with the other, then his friend justifies that this should be normal as war and conflicts should stay in the past. The leader of the White Tiger agrees outwardly, but inwardly he ponders that there is no normal for hunters, and thinking about it, he has never seen a hunter as eccentric as this partner who dislikes facing magical monsters. It's strange because combat becomes part of the routine and some even enjoy it, and perhaps that is one of the requirements to awaken. Catching his buddy off guard, Byung pretends he has a wrinkle on his forehead and takes the opportunity to say that his friend will age quickly, while the big guy tells the skinny one to shut up and drink. Finally, with a tone of irony, the healer calls Baek evil, who laughs at the joke and wants to know what she means. Returning to Jinwoo, he went straight to his mother and observes the wound on her neck with an empty look. The image carries with it painful memories of when young Sung first saw this serious injury on his mother's figure. According to Jinwoo, she suffered these burns because of him. With this in mind, the man retrieves the elixir of life from his inventory and thinks that perhaps his progenitor might not be able to swallow the liquid, and even if she can, it's uncertain what might happen next. No matter what, Jinwoo had witnessed the miracles the system could perform, as it had brought the boy from rank E all the way to this point, so he had to believe it was possible. Armed only with his faith that all he had fought for wouldn't just wash away, Jinwoo Sung opens the lid of the elixir of life and brings the bottle's neck to his mother's lips. The tension that something might go wrong momentarily holds back his impulse to finally give his beloved mother the cure for all ailments, but soon he pours a drop of the liquid into her mouth and lays her down again. Once done, the marks of wounds on the woman's body disappear as a bluish aura envelops her. Desperately inside, Jinwoo intensely hopes for her to wake up, considering his entire fight to become stronger was for this moment. Meanwhile, at her workplace, Jina can't focus on her job and seeks a reason for her distraction. Stepping out of the office building for some fresh air, she encounters a warm breeze she was unaccustomed to. At that moment, an intense glow invades the window of Jinwoo's mother's room. Noticing the presence of the light, Sung's eyes widen and he's moved to see his mother standing and asking how long she had slept. Head bowed and nearly in tears, he replies that it has been 4 years. The woman asks about Gina, and the brother assures that she is fine. Because of this, his mother thanks him, touching his face. After all, he had kept his promise. By the way, looking more closely, she observes that Jinwoo looks so grown up now, although he's far too wounded from his excessive efforts. At that moment, the young man almost lets his tears escape but insists on holding them back. His mother knows it has not been easy for him, so the boy breaks down in tears and admits that his life has not been a bed of roses, as he takes his mother's hand to his own face in a gesture of affection and longing. Finally, the woman thanks him for everything Jinwoo has done. The next day, 2 hospital doctors talk among themselves about the miracle that occurred. A patient awoke from the eternal sleep. Apparently, the woman's vital functions are normal, so her family is requesting immediate discharge. Speaking of which, seeing his mother healthy once again, Jana can't resist and hugs her right away. Watching this scene, Jinwoo reflects that this is the reward he had always wanted. In the meantime, Go-Gunny holds a press conference and thanks those present. He then reports that the flying ants from Jeju Island have started to cause damage in nearby areas, therefore the Hunters Association announced the 4th raid on this island. This operation will not only involve the S-rank members of the organization, but also 10 comrades from the Sword Wielders Guild, the most powerful in Japan. Aside from this, a rank hunters and below will protect land and sea to ensure the public remains safe. By making this statement, the president ensures that this story will have an endpoint and concludes his interview. After watching the broadcast online, Min Byung remembers a day when he went to a bar with Bak Yoonho and Eun-suk. The healer admitted he was quite scared of something, and Eun-suk agreed that fear is inevitable, but he emphasized that those who cannot fight must be thousands of times more frightened. Nonetheless, only the hunters can resolve this type of issue with their powers, and the fact is that they cannot allow the entire country to become a giant anthill. At that moment, a drunk young Bak decides to speak up, calling the ants fools in a clearly vengeful tone, as the man promises to tear apart their nest. To better introduce the drunk friend, Eun-suk explains to Byung that the guy is a bit off his rocker, but he's a good person and extremely skilled with his powers, though not so much with his personality, so when the big guy needs help, it's up to them to assist. In this, Baek concludes his painful memory from years ago. Meanwhile, the mother of Jinwoo and Gina discovers that her children are a complete mess when it comes to organization, as the house is a real mess. That is, Jinwoo blames his sister since she was alone for a week, but the mother promises to make up for all the cleaning she missed as long as the two help out. Later, when the family gathers to clean up, the woman wipes a dresser and notes that everything is getting old around here and the stains are quite tough to clean. On this, Gina recalls that they have lived there forever, while Jinwoo continues to think about how much he wanted these unique family moments back, but something still nags him about this whole story. After all, in the time since he became a hunter, the boy may have crossed a line that perhaps has no return. During this thought, Jinwoo is interrupted by his mother, who finds a portrait in the dresser and asks if the son has heard any news from the father. However, given the young man's lack of response, she mentions that she saw in the newspaper that he had become a hunter. Then she remembers that his father was a firefighter before following the same profession where the son now finds himself. According to the woman, she married him because his desire to help others always impressed her, and it seems Jinwoo inherited that from him. By the way, Jenna comments that she also wants to help many people, so much so that's why she will be a doctor. At that moment, Jinwoo Sung receives a call. Returning to the headquarters of the association, Woo praises the president's interview, but the most important subject is that the two did not expect to see a very important man. It was Thomas Andra, an American-ranked hunter capable of taking on an entire nation alone. Honestly, Jinchul had harbored a faint hope that this guy would end up getting involved in their business, and the president doesn't blame the manager given the circumstances they're in. However, the fact remains that someone with enough power to face off against a country's entire armed forces can't just interfere in foreign affairs as they please. If that were the case, Jinchul doesn't understand why this guy would come, and Go thinks maybe he was serious when he said he dropped by to say hi one day, or perhaps it has something to do with Hunter Huang. Speaking of which, the leader again asks if his subordinate has been in touch with Hunter Sung, and finally, Jinchul gives the response the boss wanted. According to the guild employee, this hunter should be arriving soon. True to his word, Jinwoo shows up at the association, and Go tells him that the operation will start in 4 days, although this raid still seems somewhat unresolved. Either way, he asks for Jinwoo's strength on loan, and Jinwoo reflects that this is a good opportunity for him to level up. However, amid this reflection, he is hit by a wave of mana, and Go is pleased that the boy managed to sense it from such a distance, explaining that the S-level hunters are training in the gym. If he's curious, some might want to check out the workout. In the midst of this in the training room, Baek faces Master Mei in a simulated battle, where Mei knocks down his opponent and even mocks him a bit. When Jinwoo arrives on the scene with Go Gunny, he is proud to see so many S ranks gathered in one place. It was probably those two who generated the mana wave that Jinwoo felt. Jinwoo comments that Baek seems to be trying too hard in this fight, but Master Choi arrives and makes it clear that Mei wouldn't stand a chance if Baek were taking the contest seriously. He then introduces this man as Mei Dongwook from the famed guild and notes that Baek is holding back because he knows he becomes a monster when he lets go too much. At that moment, the S-rank members of the Handled Sword arrive at the gym. Go to Ryuji recognizes Jinwoo Sung from afar and remarks that he is known as a killer hunter, but Hanakoa corrects that the young man is actually a mage. At the same time, Cha-ha and Lim Ta-ju also notice that Sung is present, the guy who spoiled Min Sung's presentation. Watching the fight between Mei and Baek, Ryuji comments that it is disappointing, considering they are elite fighters from this country, but Hanakoa assures him that these Koreans should not be underestimated. Despite this, 2 members of the association arrive and accuse the interpreter of speaking ill of the Koreans, even though they don't understand what she is saying. The leader of the pair is introduced by the sycophantic subordinate as Park Jong-soo, master of the Knights Guild. Cha-ha steps in and asks the guys to cool it, but Park replies that he doesn't take orders from a bunch of chickens. In any case, the start of a competitive training session between the Koreans and Japanese is announced, where they are to face off in the ring. Go suggests excluding any mages or non-combatants from this exercise as it's hard for them to fight alone. On his part, Baek thinks it's a great idea to have a free-for-all competition. considering that this raid is going to be quite chaotic, and Goto Ryuji agrees with the proposals. Thus, the association's representatives in the contest end up being Cha-Ha, Lim, Ma, and Bake, while the handled sword will be defended by Towada, Kumamoto, Hoshino, and Tanaka.
Sung Jinwoo watches the rivals positioned in the ring and notices that the leader of the Japanese team isn't fighting, but thanks to this, he gets to witness a clash between S-rank hunters. Dongwook uses an ability that makes him 3 times larger, feeling that now the competition can truly begin. As the fight kicks off, Beak chases an opponent trying to flank his allies, while the association's giant matches his brute strength against the Japanese bruiser in an exchange of incredibly intense punches. Meanwhile, Lim faces an opponent who is pure speed, trying to keep a distance before he gets kicked in the temple, especially since his specialty is long-range attack. Once he manages a gap, Lim fires his projectiles at the opponent, almost hitting the sword wielder's bruiser, prompting Hoshino to knock this guy down before things get worse for everyone. Watching the fight with some concern, Choi asks the president if the arena is reinforced with high-quality magic gems, and Go confirms that it is, but it seems they need to raise their standards since these guys are breaking everything. Chasing his rival, Beak reflects that these hunters are the cream of the crop of the Japanese S-ranks, and that it will take some heavy lifting if the association wants to win. Assuming his monstrous form, the man attacks fiercely, but the enemy always manages to escape. Facing the situation, Beak imagines that this Atsushi Kumamoto isn't the type for direct combat. Kumamoto knows he narrowly escaped and that this kind of fight isn't really his thing. Beak looks at Goto Ryuji and imagines he is testing his subordinates to see if they are ready to fight the ants. Once chosen for this test, Beak assumes an even more advanced form and feels honored to provide the response the sword wielder's master is seeking. Seeing he's about to be thrashed, Kumamoto runs from his rival as best he can, but Beak's speed is too great to evade, though the Korean can't land his claws on the Japanese. From the audience, Park Jong-soo analyzes the intensity of the battle and recognizes that as in a rank, he stands no chance in a ring of this level, though his sycophantic subordinate insists otherwise. Amid this, the sword wielder's bruiser had already finished off Ma Dongwook, while Hoshino subdues Lim and ends the duel between them. Beak clearly has the advantage in his fight, but the damned Japanese continues to dodge every attempt to strike by the Korean. The two victors of their duels go to support their colleague and position themselves in front of the White Tiger's leader. In the meantime, Cha-Hee keeps her opponent under control with a series of fast attacks. After hitting the Japanese woman, the Korean knows she needs to run to help Beak. During Cha-Hee's run, Kumamoto unexpectedly appears behind her, but the association's hunter reacts with astonishing speed and draws blood from her opponent, whose eyes begin to gain an intensity as red as that of a monster. Outside the ring, Kumamoto's acquaintances comment that no one knows what can happen when this guy reaches this stage. Hankawa asks if it might be wise to pull the boy from the ring, but Ryuji thinks that might upset some hunters. Thus, Kumamoto is left in the fight and attacks Cha-Hee with an intensity no one imagined possible. With a devastating punch, the member of the sword wielder demolishes the ground and uses the rising smoke to catch Cha-Hee off guard. However, Jinwoo Sung appears to break up the dangerous fight, making it clear that this fight has long passed the friendly stage. Not satisfied, Kumamoto continues in rage and attacks Jinwoo, who effortlessly knocks down his opponent and restrains him. Seeing what the youngster is capable of, Goto Ryuji plans to personally verify if he is really just a mage. With the Japanese under control, Jinwoo asks Cha-Hee if she sees any problem in admitting defeat, considering Beak has already given up, and the woman calmly acknowledges her loss. Meanwhile, Beak reflects sadly that he wouldn't have won against those two, even if he had given his all. Hankawa approaches Jinwoo and notifies him that his master Goto wants to duel with him. Jinwoo observes that the man radiates a fighting spirit, and that this is a good chance to test the power he acquired in the Demon Castle. At the same time, Ryuji gets irritated upon realizing that the boy smiled at the chance to face him. The interpreter confirms that the Korean has accepted the challenge, but with one condition: Goto must fight without holding back. Meanwhile, a TV news report indicates that the fourth raid on Jeju Island is approaching. Seeing that Lee Jo-hee is watching the news, a woman asks if she is going to work, but Lee says she's off today. Nonetheless, the woman insists that the hunters are focused on this raid and that the two should not be idle. After the dialogue, Lee Jo-hee steps out onto the balcony to make a call about the defense forces of the Jeju Island expedition. Back in the training room, Lim Tae-jae asks what will happen now, and Dong-wook shares that the famous 10th rank will face the sword wielder's master. Cha-hee reflects that she has seen that boy fight in an A-rank dungeon, but isn't sure if he is up to a challenge of this level. Beek asks if the woman isn't bothered by being surrounded by hunters, and she responds that one can't hold their nose the entire time on the battlefield. In fact, she thinks it might be better to stop those two, and Beek agrees that normally he would favor a duel between a fighter and a caster, but now he's thinking the same as his partner. After all, it's hard not to have expectations. If his suspicion is correct and Jin Woo-sung is an awakened who can grow stronger, nobody knows what might happen. With that, Jinwoo announces he's ready to fight, so Go-to immediately lands a punch on his rival's face, or almost does, as the Korean dodges just in time, sarcastically noting that he couldn't even finish his sentence. Sensing the aura emanating from the boy, the Japanese master doubts he's merely a mage. Either way, it's time to discover who Jin Woo-sung really is. With this in mind, the master attacks with all his speed, and Jinwoo acknowledges that he is indeed a cut above the other S ranks, but not fast enough to land a hit. Infuriated by the smile on his opponent's face, Go-to intensifies his assault. Lim admits he can't see a thing, while Dong-wook points out that the kid must be pretty tough to dodge those punches. However, Cha-hee observes that Jinwoo isn't just dodging, he's also testing his opponent's strength. After the flurry of blows, Go-to sees his opponent taking distance and dislikes the fact that he seems so at ease in the fight, so he decides to change his strategy. He then conjures a skill that wraps his fist in fire, and with even greater speed than before, the sword-wielding master slashes at Jinwoo's face, followed by a strike that makes Cha-hee fear for her colleague's life. However, when the dust settles, Jinwoo blocks the attempt and even taunts his rival, saying those pointed fingers could poke someone's eyes out. Moreover, he makes it clear it would be game over for the Japanese if he had grabbed his wrist instead of his hand. But it seems neither wants this to end too quickly. With that said, the two separate and create distance to accumulate a grotesque amount of mana. Then their subordinates realize the master is truly fighting for real. Beek fears someone might not come out of this fight alive, but Ruji and Jin Woo-sung seem to have eyes only for this duel. With their respective waves of mana, they charge into direct confrontation, but Beek and Cha-hee grab Jinwoo, while the Japanese hold back their master, as the fight would surely spiral out of control otherwise. Finally, Beek instructs Hankawa to tell the master to stop the fight. After the confrontation ends, Dong-wook jokes that the kid faced the mighty Go-to and only got a scratch, and Jinwoo reflects that he indeed took a risk, but at least he has a good sense of everyone's power. He even managed to infiltrate soldiers into the shadows of 5 of them. As the Japanese guild prepares to leave, Go-gun-hee warns Go-to that he will send information about the hunters involved in the raid. Once alone, the association's president sees Jin Woo-sung approaching and asks something about the Jeju Island mission. Meanwhile, the sword-wielding master calls a man named Ryuji and tells him about a very powerful hunter nearby. His name is Jin Woo-sung, and he has recently undergone a reawakening, being elevated to S rank with it. Ryuji finds it strange that the name of this hunter isn't on the raid list, which also surprises Go-to. Similarly, Cha-hee comments to Master Choi that Jinwoo isn't going with them on the mission, although Choi thinks the boy has his reasons, but something needs to be said. At that moment, Beek notices that Byung-gu is also not going on this mission. Finally, Choi concludes that the association still has 15 as rank hunters, meaning victory will come. As night falls, Jinwoo enters his home and is greeted by his mother and sister with dinner ready. With a smile, he announces he's back. During the meal, he reflects that his mother woke up after 4 years in a coma and that she needs him. For this reason, he will not go to Jeju Island. Meanwhile, on that same island, the queen ant laments that her subjects are devouring each other due to a lack of prey, and that this cannot continue. The queen needs to leave the island, but for that to happen, she also needs an even stronger progeny, capable of leading the kingdom. With that, a creature breaks free from its egg and undergoes a mutation that alters its body and color, making it more human-like with 2 arms and 2 legs. The queen tells her offspring to grow stronger, and the monster lets out a disturbing scream that sends a surreal wave of mana. Back in the city, the next day, the TV announces that flying ants have been evolving at a worrying rate, as they were still terrestrial during the third raid on Jeju Island, but now possess humanoid traits and a pair of wings on their back. Walking through the streets, Min Byung sees children pretending to be S-rank hunters. Nearby, in a coffee shop, Yoo Jin-woo tries to convince Han Song-yi not to join the defense force because she's still E-rank. The city's sound system announces that hunters are being recruited to protect Korea under the circumstances, while Lee Jo-hee encounters none other than Song Cheol. As night approaches, Go Gun-hee eagerly awaits tomorrow, when the raid on Jeju Island will begin. When dawn breaks again, the attack operation begins with the fleets of ships arriving near the mission location. On one of these ships, a member of the Knights Guild asks the master if they are really capable of facing the ants, and Park Jong-soo responds that they will only know if they fight, but either way, they were sent just in case of an emergency. Elsewhere, the Fame Guild arrives by helicopter, then the leader Ma Dong-wook bids farewell to the vice master to go to war. Nearby, Min-sung attracts all the media clicks as usual, while Lim demands that someone bring him back immediately before any trouble occurs. At the same time, the worried faces of the hunters can be seen both on the attack fleets and the coastal guard. Meeting with the association president, Jin-chul reports that all units are ready. Go is pleased to have many volunteers defending the country, and relieved that a certain someone changed their mind and decided to join the offensive. At that moment, Beek is startled to see Byung-gu approaching. Then the two great friends greet each other. Meanwhile, in the city at the center of the island, the elite groups of Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie swordbearers take their strategic positions. Being airlifted to their mission, the hunters from the association notice that the board has sent a team of cameramen to broadcast the battle to the people. Dong-wook asks if the cameraman will be okay, but he assures that he's used to filming in dangerous situations. Besides, Ma hopes this will be the last S-rank raid on this island. Otherwise, the entire country might vanish. On this note, Beek mentally agrees and adds that a national hero needs to emerge from this confrontation. Jin-chul informs Go that the attack team is ready to move, so the leader announces the start of the fourth raid on Jeju Island. Similarly, Go-to Ruji demands full strength from the diversionary force, which starts operating with an incredible amount of mana that impresses Beek from high in the helicopter. Amidst this, some ants begin to emerge from the anthill, so Choi heads to the rear exit of the vehicle and bluntly blows up the insects. However, as an infinite number keep appearing every second, he realizes he'll need to push himself a bit further. Soon after eradicating the threat, he asks if it's time to land yet. Thus, with the helicopter on the ground, Beek believes the Japanese can keep the ants distracted for an hour, which is the time the Koreans have to eliminate the queen. From the operations room, Ryuji orders the start of interference, and a powerful signal is emitted to prevent the ants from receiving the queen's emergency call. In the midst of the war, Cha-hee's rival in the simulated battle warns that Kumamoto will die if he continues to be paralyzed like this. A Japanese woman wonders if it wouldn't be better to kill all the ants at once, while a colleague questions where Kenzo is. Meanwhile, the brute is smashing insects in another corner as if he were a child having fun. Elsewhere on the island, a Japanese man sees the smoke caused by Choi's fire and asks his partner if he would be able to defeat that master in a duel, even though his power is ice. After sealing the entrance to the nest, Choi Jongin moves forward with his group, but many different tunnels make the path confusing. Beek questions which way they should go. Then Choi conjures a fireball so they don't have to check for danger in each hole. From now on, it's just a matter of finding the tunnel that leads to the deepest point, and the man believes it might be a specific one. Meanwhile, Jin-woo finishes his daily exercise quota. Relaxed, he imagines the S ranks of the expedition will handle the ants without much trouble, even though he isn't there. As they follow a good path inside the tunnel chosen by Choi, Lim Tae-jae thinks the queen might have fled, but Beek reminds him that escaping from this island isn't an option. At that moment, Choi calls his comrades to see an egg chamber, which makes them believe the queen might be nearby. At the same time, they spot the giant egg, which causes apprehension among the team members in front of the creature that emerged from it. Meanwhile, Kenzo is injured and asks to be healed by the group's healer, Shimizu, who opens her mouth to ask something in return from the big guy. However, before they realize it, something rips the girl's head off.